Chapter 954. The 5-meter-tall giant dragon walked towards Amy's, and attracted the attention of many passers-by. Giant dragons below the 8th tier were not allowed to fly in Chaos City, so most of the giant dragons would transform into their human forms. However, there were a minority of giant dragons who did not like to be in human form, but were not powerful enough. Hence, they could only follow Chaos City's rules and shrink to a height of less than 5 meters, and move around on foot. A 5-meter-tall giant dragon should be called a small giant dragon. After all, even ordinary forest trolls could reach a height of 5 meters when they reached adulthood. Hence, very few giant dragons would move around in Chaos City in such a manner. Who would not want to save face? This was a red dragon. It was not a very powerful race among the giant dragons, and it was obvious that it was a young dragon. However, even if it was a young dragon, its power was not to be underestimated. From the aura it was emitting, it was at least a 5th-tier giant dragon. Big Sister Anna, look. There's a little dragon over there. It's so small. It's wobbling like a little fool. Amy, who was sitting at the restaurant's entrance with Anna on a small stool, looked at the giant dragon striding over with amazement. Yeah. It's really small compared to the giant dragons I've seen before. Anna's little face was also full of shock. She had seen giant dragons from afar before, and that huge figure had left a deep impression on her. The red dragon Chown stopped 10 meters away, and looked at the long line at the restaurant's entrance. He mumbled to himself, "It's really annoying to see so many people lining up here. Let's just go to the front. Father said that we have to be the first in everything we do, so we have to be the first in line. Giant dragons are the noblest and most powerful beings on the continent, so it's only right for us to be the first in line." With that in mind, the red dragon Chown walked to the front of the line. The ground trembled as his huge body stepped on it. Is this fellow trying to cut the line? The customers in the line looked at Chown in confusion. If that was really the case, it had been a long time since they had seen someone do that. One had to know that the people at the front of the line were the great magic casters Crassus and Julian. Who on the Norland continent dared to cut their line? Even those dragon kings on Dragon Island would feel guilty, right? Hey, little guy, are you trying to cut the queue? Sargeras walked out of the group and looked up at Chown. Let's go. Chown looked left and right before lowering his head to look at Sargeras. He said disdainfully, "Yes. Do I need to report my matters to a little demon like you?" Her father had told her that the dragons were the most powerful race on the Norland continent, and that they didn't have to listen to anyone. That won't be necessary. Sargeras shook his head. Then, he lifted the folding chair in his hand, leaped up, and smashed it on the dragon's head. Bang! With a muffled sound, the 5-meter-tall dragon flew backward and landed 100 meters away, right at the end of the line. However, I can help you return to your rightful position. Sargeras put away the folding chair and returned to the group. There was a round of applause in the line, and the guests all looked at Sargeras with approval. Boss, nice chair technique. Boss smashed a dragon with a chair. If this gets out, our Burning Legion's reputation will increase again. The members of the Burning Legion chuckled. They didn't care about the little dragon at all. I'm saving that kid. If it were little boss, he would be in trouble, Sargeras said with a smile as he glanced at Amy, who was sitting on the stool eagerly. That's true. The Burning Legion members nodded in agreement. It didn't matter if little boss could win the fight or not. What was important was that her 2 great magic caster masters were sitting there. This was simply against the rules. Amy sighed, and dejectedly said, Uncle Big Bald Head is so annoying. It's not easy for a little dragon to come and cause trouble, but it was smacked away just like that. I didn't even have time to do anything. Anna covered her mouth and chuckled. She had a deep impression of those few demon uncles. Although they looked scary, they were all very good demons, and not scary at all. Chown, who was smacked away more than 100 meters by the chair, landed in a pile of bushes. He stood up with a red bump on his head. He still felt dizzy, but there was a lingering fear in his heart. What a scary weapon. It actually smacked me so far away. This demon is so scary and powerful. Its ability is actually comparable to Father's. Boo-hoo. It hurts. Chown wanted to cry. This was the first time he was hit, and he was smacked away in front of so many people. His dignity as a dragon was completely trampled on. Although he was angry, he couldn't summon up the courage to get back at that demon from society with tattoos all over his body. That smack by the mysterious weapon just now had completely destroyed his confidence. This is so embarrassing. Moreover, I can't beat it. I've become a joke in front of so many people. Should I go back and get help? Chown hesitated. Those in the line were all looking at him and laughing secretly. However, he quickly made up his mind. He shook his head and said, "No, I've already been beaten up. It's too much of a loss if I don't eat something. Even if it's a joke, I have to eat and dash." The restaurant opened for business very soon. The long line gradually shortened. After waiting for a long time, it was finally Chown's turn. Chown walked straight into the restaurant, but stopped when he reached the entrance. He looked at the small door that he couldn't pass through, and muttered unhappily, "Why is this door so small? Do I have to break it open?" "Sir, if you can't shrink your body size, you can only sit in the outdoor seats outside. Also, there are no suitable seats for you, so if you want, please bring your own chair next time," Yabamiya said to Chown with a smile as she stood at the entrance of the restaurant. She didn't know if it was because she had slept with Elizabeth, but she didn't feel any fear when she saw a giant dragon now. She even vaguely felt like she was looking down on this red dragon. What kind of stupid rule is this? I'm here to eat, and they don't even let me through the door. They even want me to bring my own chair. How can a noble giant dragon like me be like them? Chown said agitatedly. Then, he turned his head and saw Sargeras sitting on a folding chair with flames all over his body. There were also lava trolls standing or sitting at the side with flames all over their bodies and smiling at him. Chown's expression froze instantly. Chapter 955. Little brother, what are we like? Keel asked with a grin. The feeling of the chair rubbing against your face is so comfortable. Do you want our boss to massage you a few more times? I think that's most likely the case. Why don't I do it this time? The people from the Burning Legion laughed and looked at Chown unkindly. To the Burning Legion, Memes was like a holy place. This was the place where holy Rugiamos were produced. If someone dared to behave atrociously here, it was a disrespect to the Burning Legion. They didn't kill him directly because they didn't want to pollute the holy place. Mr. Mack said to be reasonable. Sargeras raised his hand to signal the people from the Burning Legion not to act rashly. He stuffed a Rugiamo into his mouth, chewed it carefully, and swallowed it. Then, he stood up with red flames burning all over his body. He asked Chown, "Is it difficult to line up?" Chown took a look at that folding chair. He thought of that horrible blow and his cheek that was still hurting. He shook his head quickly. Sargeras took a step forward, and asked, "Is it difficult to bring your own chair?" "No. It's not difficult." Chown took 2 steps back subconsciously, and shook his head quickly. "Then, is it hard for you to sit outside?" Sargeras' smile became brighter and kinder. Chown's hair stood on end. He felt like he was going to cry. He took 2 more steps back, and shook his head. "No. No. It's my honor." Sargeras nodded with satisfaction. That's right. That's a good boy. If you make trouble here, the chair will take care of you easily. You have to learn to respect it. Chow nodded with a strong smile even though he wanted to cry. Bill, please. Sargeras retracted the flames on his body, and gently placed the gold coin in Anna's hand before leaving with the burning legion. Eat well, Keel reminded Chown with a smile. Phew. Chown didn't dare to take a deep breath until Sargeras and the others were far away. It's so scary. These guys are robbers. Isn't Chaos City the safest place? How can there be such terrifying demons? Sir, there are seats over there now. What would you like to order? Yabamiya said to Chown with a smile. There weren't many customers that were too large. Usually, big guys like the Forest Trolls would go to the Forest Trolls restaurant for a meal. There, they would be able to get a suitable seat and a sufficient amount of food. Chown glanced in the direction that Sargeras and the rest had left. After making sure that they were far away, he walked to the table with relief. He glanced at the small chair, and sat down on it. It was still 3 meters tall. He looked down at the table, which was also very small. As for the menu, it was smaller than one of his claws. What do you have here? Chown was too lazy to look at the menu, and asked Yabamiya directly. After suffering so much, he would feel terrible if he did not have a good meal today. Yabamiya smiled and said, Our restaurant offers many types of food, all of which are well received by our customers. For example, the eggplant with garlic sauce that we just introduced today has also been well received. Then I'll have 5 servings of eggplant with garlic sauce. Chown said without hesitation. He loved eating fish the most. He just did not know if the fish in this restaurant was good. Eggplant with garlic sauce is 400 copper coins per serving, and rice is 50 copper coins per serving. Are you sure you want 5 servings? Yabamiya confirmed again. It was not too surprising that a giant dragon of this size would order 5 servings of eggplant with garlic sauce. It doesn't matter. Chown waved his hand. He was not going to pay anyway. He would just find an excuse and leave. It was not the first time he had eaten a free meal. He used to eat a lot when he was with his father. Furthermore, money was his favorite. How could he pay someone else? All right, please wait a moment. Yabamiya nodded. He took the orders of the few customers who had just taken their seats and went in. Chown's eggplant with garlic sauce was served not long after. This fish smells so good. Chown's eyes lit up immediately. He lowered his head and took a deep sniff. He was intoxicated. He did not expect that there would be someone in this world who could make fish so tempting. Although he was huge, Chown used his 3 claws to grab the chopsticks very nimbly. He quickly picked up a piece of eggplant and put it into his mouth. Ah! It's not fish. Chown was stunned. The food in his mouth was obviously not fish. The texture was completely different from fish. There was no fishy taste at all. But it's so delicious. Although it wasn't fish, the eggplant melted in his mouth. It was sweet and sour with a little spicy taste. Chown's eyes lit up immediately. He had never eaten something so delicious. It was more delicious than any other fish. Chown couldn't find any words to describe this delicacy, because none of the food he had ever eaten could compare to it. However, when he ate delicious food in the future, he would have another adjective, as delicious as eggplant with garlic sauce. A mouthful of eggplant with garlic sauce, a mouthful of rice, and a small helping of eggplant with garlic sauce and a bowl of rice were quickly finished. Then, a second helping, a third helping, until all 5 servings were in his stomach. The customers at the same table as him had secretly swallowed their saliva a few times. They could not help but order an eggplant with garlic sauce as well. This is so satisfying. I didn't expect to be able to eat such delicious food in Chaos City. Father did not lie to me. Chown put down the bowl in his hand contentedly. He looked around. Now that he was full, it was time to escape. The most important step of a dine and dash was naturally to escape. 5 servings of eggplant with garlic sauce and 10 bowls of rice. The total is 25 gold coins. However, Chown had just stood up when a crisp voice sounded beside him. Chown looked around, and finally lowered his head to see the tiny Anna at his feet. He blinked, and stuck his head down. His huge head stopped in front of Anna, and he grinned, showing his sharp teeth. He sneered, and said, "Pay." "Ha, I haven't settled the score with you yet. You didn't put any fish in the dish, but called it eggplant with garlic sauce. How dare you cheat a giant dragon? Who gave you the guts? Lord Dragon is in a good mood today, so I won't be calculative with you. Otherwise, I will eat you up in one bite, and then smash this stupid restaurant. Eat, pay, or I will beat you all to death." Just then, a childish voice sounded. Amy walked to Anna's side, and looked up at Chown. She asked seriously, "Stinky Dragon, are you going to pay, or be beaten to death?" Chapter 956. Amy's voice wasn't loud, and there was even a hint of childishness in it, but it was clearly heard by Chown and the customers eating at the entrance of the restaurant. Is this fellow trying to dine and dash? Who gave him the courage? I don't know who gave him the courage, but I just want to send him off now. He's trying to dine and dash at Amy's, isn't he too stubborn? Doesn't he know that the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire are little boss's masters, and that Castellan Michael and Principal Novan are regular customers of the restaurant? Everyone looked at Chown with pity. This little red dragon who had just been taught a lesson by the Burning Legion obviously didn't learn his lesson well. Instead, he was walking further and further down the path of seeking death. A 5th-tier little dragon dares to threaten my Anna. Should I braise him or roast him? Shirley, who was clearing the table, suddenly looked out of the restaurant with a cold glint in her eyes. Bobla took a look at Chown, and quickly lost interest. She thought to herself in boredom, this fellow, I don't think he can even defeat little Amy, right? Meg, who was cooking in the restaurant, also received the system's feedback. He looked in the direction of the restaurant's entrance, and didn't show any signs of nervousness. A fellow of this level, Amy shouldn't have any problem dealing with him, right? Meg thought to himself. He still had this bit of confidence in his heart. Chown's huge eyes turned and landed on Amy. This little fellow looked even smaller than Anna, and was no different from a little white rabbit in his eyes. But this little white rabbit actually dared to threaten to kill him. Ha ha ha. This is the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life. Chown raised his head and laughed maniacally. Then, he suddenly lowered his head to look at Amy, and grinned, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. He said coldly, "Little fellow, if you don't scram now, this Lord Dragon will eat both of you up. Amy, be careful." A hint of fear appeared on Anna's face, and she spread her arms in front of Amy to protect her. The commotion outside the restaurant attracted the attention of the customers in the restaurant. Although they found it hard to believe that someone would dare to cause trouble at Mamie's, a few of the customers near the entrance and the floor-to-ceiling windows stood up when they saw this scene. Little Boss was everyone's favorite. This little dragon actually dared to bare its teeth at her. This behavior was much worse than cutting the queue. Moreover, the little elf cashier was also very cute. Moreover, she was also very kind and polite. Just looking at these two little cuties made people have the urge to hug them, and this guy actually dared to threaten them. Feeling the gazes on him, Chown's expression became even more smug, and he thought gleefully, "Haha, now you know how powerful I am, right? It's just a restaurant opened by a human. I'm already giving you face by coming here to eat. You actually want to charge me. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If we weren't in Chaos City, I would really want to eat these two little fellows. They should taste better than the freshest rabbit, right? Chown thought greedily as he glanced at Amy and Anna. However, his father had warned him before he came here that he must not kill anyone in Chaos City. Hence, he could only think of it regretfully in his heart as he turned to leave. He was very satisfied with the free meal today, so he planned to bring his father and mother to have another meal tomorrow. Anyway, he didn't have to pay. Who would dare to stop him? No one would dare to stop a powerful giant dragon. Very good, stinky dragon. You've made a different choice. Just then, Amy's voice sounded again. Johnson, who had just taken a few steps, stopped in his tracks. There was a murderous glint in his red eyes. He slowly turned to look at Amy, and coldly said, "Don't challenge a giant dragon's patience and dignity. Otherwise, you will die a horrible death. Don't doubt Amy's words. Otherwise, you will die a horrible death too." A magic caster's staff that was taller than a grown man appeared in Amy's hand, and she stood in front of Anna. She looked at Johnson with a serious expression and said, "Pay up for your meal, or I'll beat you to death." Chown sneered disdainfully. "Hee hee, little imp. I'll stand here and let you hit me. I'm afraid you can't even hit my knees even if you jump up. Go and get your father here. Let him kowtow to me and admit his mistake. Then, I'll let this matter go. Otherwise, I won't let you off today. This fellow. He's really annoying." The customers eating outside the restaurant looked at Chown indignantly. Some of them had already reached for their weapons. As regular customers of Amy's, it was only right for them to draw their weapons and help. When the tiny Amy and the red dragon stood side by side, they looked like a harmless little rabbit challenging an elephant. Many of the customers had the urge to draw their swords and help. Some of the girls looked worried. Chown, who was in his dragon form, looked a little fierce. It would be terrible if he accidentally hurt Amy and Anna. What a delightful choice. Amy reached out her little hand to Chown. Extreme coldness descended instantly. The smile on Chown's face froze. There was a trace of fear in his eyes. The air seemed to be frozen at this moment. Other than his thoughts, his body could not move at all. Is this the domain of a high-level magic caster? Is there a powerful magic caster in this restaurant? Chown was shocked. He wanted to struggle, but he could not move at all. I'm a noble red dragon. Even if there really is a high-level magic caster, would he dare to attack me? Isn't he afraid of my father's anger? However, Chown quickly regained his composure and thought confidently. Then, he saw a magic caster's staff coming closer and closer. His eyes widened. "Since you've asked so sincerely, I'll be merciful and fulfill your wish. Go. Stinky dragon." Amy's voice sounded. She leaped high and waved her magic wand at the 5-meter-tall Chown. Bam! With a muffled sound, the 5-meter-tall red dragon was hit on the head by Amy's magic wand. It flew into the sky as if it was hit by a heavy hammer. After landing lightly on the ground, Amy extended her right hand towards the sky. A huge fireball appeared and chased after the dragon that was still flying into the sky. Boom! The fireball caught up with the red dragon and exploded in the air. The exploding fireball was even more dazzling than fireworks. Many people raised their heads to look at this scene, and they felt their moods brighten as well. Little boss is so scary. Then, all eyes fell on AI.me, and a strong thought arose in everyone's mind. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 957. Smack. The charred red dragon fell from the sky and landed in a bush. Its body was black and smoking, and there was a burnt smell in the air. All of the guests were stunned as they looked at the harmless Amy and the smoking giant dragon on the ground not far away. They still couldn't believe that Amy was the one who had just unleashed such an elegant attack that was both violent and magical at the same time. This scene is extremely pleasing. She's indeed the disciple of the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire. Little Boss is awesome. She's more than awesome. She's invincible. Little Boss has become a dragon-slaying hero at such a young age. She's going to catch up to Master Alex. The combination of melee magic and long-range magic was perfect at this moment. I think it won't be long before the magic world will be shaken up by this completely disruptive magic caster. The customers who were about to attack sat back down. It seemed like there was no room for them to do anything. Little Boss could handle it herself. Everyone looked at Amy differently. If it was said that Amy being taken in as a disciple by Julian and Crassus proved her talent, then the ability to kill a 5th-tier red dragon in an instant proved that the two legendary magic casters were not wrong. Moreover, compared to the rumors, this little magic caster who had only learned magic for less than a year had even greater talent in magic and combat. This little girl's talent in magic is so strong. She's much stronger than the last time. She's been promoted consecutively in just a few months. Even Princess Irina didn't reach this level back then. Shirley looked at Amy in surprise. She knew better about Irina's terrifying talent back then. But in front of Amy, even Irina paled in comparison. Amy is awesome. She successfully defeated the bad guy again. Yabamiya also revealed a joyful smile. After all, the opponent was a red dragon, although it was only a young one. She knows how to hold back. She's grown up a lot. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. He was not too surprised by the outcome of the battle, but when he heard everyone's praise for Amy, he could not help but feel happy. Anna stared at the smoking dragon with her mouth slightly agape. She looked at Amy in awe and exclaimed, "That's amazing. Let's go collect the money now." "How much should we collect, Miss Anna?" Amy turned around and looked at Anna with a cute smile, as if what had just happened had nothing to do with her. But Anna looked at the charred crimson dragon, and asked hesitantly, "Is he dead?" Amy shook her head and said with a smile, "No, I purposely left him alive to pay for it. After he pays, we'll kill him." The customers all looked at him. Little Boss was indeed brave and resourceful. Although his words sounded a little scary, they felt that it was inexplicably cute. After all, what the red dragon said just now was several times worse than what Little Boss said, so no one pitied him at all. "If we kill him, it's not very good, right?" Anna looked at Chown with pity. The customers' expressions softened a little. It seemed that this little elf was more soft-hearted. She actually pitied the crimson dragon after being threatened like that. "Why don't we grill him on the grill? When both sides are golden brown, sprinkle some cumin powder. That way, they'll know the price of not paying for their meals in the future," Anna continued. "Ha!" The customers all stared at the smiling Anna. They did not expect her to be such a ruthless person. That's a good idea. I haven't eaten grilled dragon before. I wonder if it's delicious." Amy's eyes lit up, and she became eager to try it. This cashier duo is too scary. They're simply two little devils among angels. The customers did not know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at Amy and Anna. They suddenly missed Miss Aisha. "I won't dine and dash anymore. I'll give you all my money. I won't dare to do it again." Chown, who was lying half dead on the ground, suddenly jumped up and spat out a treasure chest with a clang. Then, he turned and ran away, his tail still emitting sparks, leaving a trail of dust behind. The cooked dragon actually flew away. Amy was stunned for a moment. When she saw that the crimson dragon had already disappeared, she helplessly put away the magic caster's staff in her hand and turned to look at the treasure chest that was taller than her. There were a few beautiful sapphires embedded in it. If he's using this box to pay the bill, shouldn't we give him the change? Anna also walked up and sized up the huge sapphires embedded in the chest. The dazzling luster looked quite expensive. One of the customers squinted at the sapphires, and his eyes lit up immediately. He said in surprise, "The one in the middle of the chest is not a sapphires. It should be a blue diamond from Vic Mountain. This kind of diamond is extremely rare. In the history of the goblins' mining, less than 1,000 of them have been mined, and those of this size and purity are less than 100. Just this blue diamond alone is worth at least 100,000 gold coins." As soon as he said that, there was a series of gasps. 100,000 gold coins was a huge sum of money. Even if most of the people present were petty bourgeois, not many of them could own a blue diamond worth 100,000 gold coins. A guy with a blue diamond worth 100,000 gold coins actually dared to dine and dash. In the end, he lost the blue diamond. How stupid. The customers all thought in their hearts, and at the same time, cast envious gazes at Amy and Anna. These two little fellows had received a huge sum of money. Is it an empty chest? Amy muttered curiously, and then pushed open the chest lid. The dazzling light made the dark night become bright, and also blinded the eyes of the people who were looking over. That chest was full of gems and treasures. The dragon coin was only the most inconspicuous item among them, and the reflection of the light was eye-catching. Wow! Oh my God! Is this the collection of a giant dragon? He obviously has so many treasures, but he insisted on dining and dashing, and even daring to eat from Amy's. Why bother? The red dragon failed to dine and dash, and Mr. Mac is the biggest winner. The shiny treasures in the chest caused a commotion among the customers. Just the blue diamond on the chest lid alone was worth 100,000 gold coins. The value of this chest full of treasures was beyond most people's imagination. That's more like it. Amy nodded in satisfaction, and then casually closed the chest lid, and said matter-of-factly, "This is the fine. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 958. You Have to Avenge Me. Page 1/1, gulp. Many people swallowed their saliva at the same time. They were scared. No one dared to dine and dash at Mamie's anymore. Not only would they be blacklisted, they would also have to pay a huge fine. The amount of fine was shocking. However, not many people felt that Amy should not have taken the money. The giant dragon had thrown it out himself, and he was indeed in the wrong. As for whether there would be any trouble after taking it, if they weren't worried about Julian and Crassus causing trouble for them, they could come and cause trouble for little boss. Then I'll move the fine inside. Yabamiya smiled as she walked out. She reached out and picked up the treasure chest. It was rather heavy, but fortunately, she was very strong. Carrying the treasure chest was no problem at all. Amy followed him through the door and trotted to the kitchen door. She poked her head out and looked at Meg. "Father, I've seized a treasure chest. Where should I put it?" Meg looked at the treasure chest in Yabamiya's arms with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Although he had heard the uproar among the customers, he did not expect Amy to have obtained such a rich treasure. He thought for a moment and said, "Put it under the counter first." "Okay." Yabamiya nodded and placed the chest under the counter. "System, check the value of the treasures inside this treasure chest," Meg said inwardly. After the system's conversion, the total value of all the gems, rare metals, dragon coins, and other items in this treasure chest is 315 million copper coins. This is based on the current market value. As some of the rare metals and gems only appear in auctions, the total value will fluctuate to a certain extent, the system quickly replied. Meg raised an eyebrow. He didn't expect that Amy would be able to achieve 3 small goals just by casually teaching a meal to a dragon. It was even more than what he had earned in the past few months. Of course, what surprised him even more was that such a huge amount of treasure actually appeared in the hands of a 5th-grade dragon. It was no secret that dragons loved treasures. With the dragon's powerful strength and long lifespan, the treasures they could collect in their lifetime would be a huge amount. However, those were powerful giant dragons that had lived for at least hundreds of years. It was a little unreasonable for such a huge amount of treasure to appear in the hands of a young dragon. Apart from the fact that the dragon had gotten lucky and obtained a large amount of treasure, the only other possibility was that it was a brat from a rich family. Judging from his previous behavior, the second possibility was obviously more likely. This was a huge sum of money that could be obtained very easily, but it was also a huge sum of money that could not be kept as one's own. Father, isn't Amy awesome? Amy looked at Meg expectantly, her little face saying, "Quick, praise me." Meg looked at Amy and nodded dotingly. Yes, Amy maintained order in the restaurant and helped Anna complete the cashier's work. Very good. Anna completed the cashier's work excellently. Very good, too. Then Meg looked at Anna and praised her again. Amy and Anna revealed happy smiles on their faces. The 2 little fellows had no idea about the value of the treasures in the heavy box, so after receiving Meg's praise, they continued to immerse themselves in their work as cashiers. After the customers in the restaurant sighed with emotion, they did not continue to pay too much attention to the private room's performance. However, with the lesson of the past, the customers became especially cooperative with Anna's cashier's work. After the dinner service ended, Yabamia, Barbara, and Phyllis finished their work and left first. After Shirley cleaned up the restaurant, she also prepared to leave with Anna. When she reached the door, she stopped, looked at Meg, and said, "What do you plan to do with that box of gems? If I'm not wrong, that little dragon should have some status in the Red Dragon tribe. Let's leave it for a few days first. If no one comes to claim it, then we'll consider it a fine. If someone comes to claim it, then we'll have to reason with them," Mag said to Shirley with a smile. Shirley thought for a while, and a smile also appeared on her face. Giant dragons never like to reason with people. However, the Red Dragon tribe is not a powerful dragon tribe. There's only one 10th-tier giant dragon. If Amy's teacher is here, he naturally won't be able to reason with you. That's good. Meg nodded, and his smile became even brighter. In this world, most of the time, the bigger fist was the law. Although it was a little domineering, it was also very interesting sometimes. Shirley left with Anna. Meg closed and locked the door, and then lowered the blinds. Only then did he carry the heavy treasure box out from under the counter. Amy came over with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and asked curiously, "Father, what are you doing?" "I haven't touched so much money in a long time. I want to satisfy my craving," Meg said with a smile. Then, he opened the lid of the treasure box. The gems reflected the light and refracted a gorgeous light. The whole restaurant was filled with the candlelight of treasures. 10 seconds later, Meg closed the lid with a dull expression. "Such a tacky thing. I can't accept it in a different world." Meg shook his head. He had seen too many famous paintings and jewelry that were worth hundreds of millions in his previous life. One of his mother's hobbies was collecting jewelry. Any one of the jewelry boxes was worth more than this whole box. So, when he saw this box full of treasures, it was very difficult for him to feel anything. The only thing that moved him a little was how many strength points he could exchange from the system with this unexpected windfall. System, if I use all the money in this box to exchange for strength points, how many points can I get? Meg asked directly in his mind. The system fell into a long silence. In the end, it said quietly, this money is not the normal income of the host from running the restaurant. It cannot be chosen in the system's exchange terms. The system will have to do a comprehensive risk assessment before it can reply to this question. The assessment time is estimated to be 3 days. Then you can do the assessment. Meg stuffed the treasure box into the safe in the cabinet. This was one of the improvements made by the system after upgrading the restaurant. A spacious safe was added to the counter to store the restaurant's high daily turnover. Then, he brought Amy upstairs to wash up and sleep. Father. I was almost beaten to death, and the treasure box you gave me was also stolen. I don't have anything left. You have to avenge me. On Red Dragon Island, in an empty cave, a rather pitiful voice sounded. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 959. My son. 2 red dragons with a wingspan of dozens of meters descended from the cave. Their red eyes were filled with fury as they looked at the charred Chown. The red dragon, Chown, with a wingspan of over 20 meters, looked as though he had just rolled through a fireball. His entire body was charred black, and his flesh was lacerated. He was in a terrible state, and his aura was very weak. Chown, tell mother. Who did this? How dare they do this to you? The female dragon used her wings to brush the wounds on Chown's body gently. Her fury almost materialized, and red flames started to burn on her body. The male dragon at the side also angrily said, how dare someone do this to my son? Tell father who that fellow is. I will tear him into pieces. And get back the treasure chest for you. The angry roar reverberated in the empty cave, and even the mountain rocks were trembling slightly. It's a 4 or 5-year-old half-elf. Chown said angrily. The 2 red dragons' expressions froze instantly. They felt that they had heard wrongly. Chown, who did you say beat you up? The red dragon Chown asked in a deep voice. Chown looked at Chown, and felt a little ashamed when he thought about how he was beaten up by a 4 or 5-year-old half-elf. However, when he thought about how he had just gotten the treasure chest from his father, and lost it just like that, he was very indignant. He had to make those 2 brats pay the price to get rid of the anger in his heart. He replied, in Chaos City, at a restaurant called Mamie's. I was beaten up by a 4 or 5-year-old half-elf. The cave became quiet all of a sudden. You're saying that you, a noble red dragon who had just had your coming-of-age ceremony, was beaten up by a 4-year-old half-elf? And your treasure chest was stolen? Anger was building up in Chown's eyes. Father, Fear appeared in Chown's eyes, and he moved closer to the female dragon instinctively. Enough. Johnson, if you have the ability, go and attack that half-elf bastard who hurt my son. That little bastard must have done something bad. Otherwise, with my son's intelligence and strength, how could he have been hurt by her? The female dragon roared as she stood in front of Chown. Yes, it wasn't just a half-elf, there was also a group of lava trolls. They were the ones who beat me up. There were too many of them. Otherwise, I would have defeated all of them. Chown quickly nodded. Johnson was frightened by the she-dragon's roar. He glanced at Chown and nodded. All right, I will definitely not let this matter rest. I want to see how a group of lava demons dare to disrespect the Red Dragon tribe. They must pay the price. I'll go with you tomorrow. I'm going to swallow that little bastard alive to avenge my son. The mother dragon said through gritted teeth. The story of Amy burning the giant dragon quickly became a topic of conversation among the customers in the queue. The cute little Amy smacked the 5-meter-tall giant dragon away with her magic staff, and then chased after it with a fireball. This scene was very shocking in itself. Actually, you guys have overlooked a very important point. Before the giant dragon was sent flying, Little Boss had cast a spell on it. It was a temporary confinement spell. That's why the giant dragon didn't have time to react, a Grey Temple mage said with a smile. Oh. What kind of confinement spell was that? Everyone looked at that mage curiously. It was not easy to see a mage from the Grey Temple usually, but they were often seen in the queue outside Amy's. If I'm not wrong, it might be the Field of Extreme Frost. Although it only lasted for a very short time, I'm sure it was not an ordinary frost spell, that mage said with a smile. Isn't the Field of Extreme Frost something that only advanced mages can use? Is Little Boss already an advanced mage? A young man exclaimed, causing quite a commotion. A 4-year-old advanced mage. This world is too crazy, isn't it? I don't think so. Judging from the power of the fireball, Little Boss should still be at the 5th tier. That Field of Extreme Frost that lasted for a very short time is most likely due to Little Boss's amazing talent. She comprehended it in advance. The mage from the Grey Temple shook his head. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. If she was a 5th tier mage, although it would be equally shocking, at least it would be slightly easier to accept. But no matter what, the youngest dragon-slaying warrior was almost born yesterday. Compared to Sir Alex, it seems to be much earlier, right? Yes, Sir Alex is back, and Little Boss is like a rising star. I feel that the world will become more and more interesting because of these two people. I just don't know what will happen if Sir Alex meets Little Boss in the future. A strongest knight against a mage who is good at both close combat and long-range attacks. Just thinking about it makes my blood boil. Some of the customers were discussing fervently. Meg, who was pushing the bicycle out to send Amy to school, heard the conversation of the customers, and a smile appeared on his face. If they meet, there's probably no more harmonious scene than this, right? Father, is this Sir Alex that they're talking about, a very powerful person? I seem to hear a lot of people talking about him every day. Sitting on the back seat of the bicycle, Amy asked curiously. Yes, he's a very powerful person. Meg nodded with a smile. Probably there's no other person in the world who's as powerful as Alex, right? Amy's eyes lit up, and she nodded her little head. If even Father says so, then he must be someone as powerful as Father. When Amy grows up, I'll become someone like him. Okay, Father will accompany Meg. Meg nodded with a smile. This little girl's mouth was really sweet. When he sent Amy to school, many students stared at Meg, and some of them whispered, "Look, he's the uncle who made the kebabs, the invincible king of wind and fire wheels, Amy's father." Although Meg was a little speechless about the strange prefix used by himself and Amy, it seemed that the kebabs on the day of the parent-teacher conference had indeed left a deep impression on the students. On the way back to the restaurant, Meg saw the Catering Association's countdown bulletin board in the square. Until the release of the new Aiden Square food rankings, 10 days. I wonder if that mysterious food taster has come to eat at the restaurant, Meg muttered to himself, and continued to ride toward the restaurant. At noon, there were still a few minutes before Amy's opened for business, and there was a long line of hundreds of people at the door. "You bastard who beat up my son, come out and die." A furious voice exploded like thunder, accompanied by the roar of a dragon. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 960. The angry roar exploded in the ears of the customers in the queue like a sudden clap of thunder, accompanied by a terrifying pressure. The faces of the ordinary people among the customers turned pale in an instant, and fear appeared on their faces. The faces of the powerful customers also changed slightly. Such a powerful pressure could only be emitted by an 8th-tier giant dragon. Such power was indeed terrifying. Could it be that the giant dragon that was beaten up by Little Boss yesterday went home to look for his father? What a terrifying giant dragon pressure! A customer exclaimed softly. In the sky, 2 red dragons with a wingspan of dozens of meters brought a smaller red dragon with them as they swooped down towards Amy's. The hurricane they created bent the trees at the entrance, and some of the weaker customers were also blown back. Ha ha ha, you dared to laugh at me yesterday. Are you scared now? You damned reptiles. Chown looked down at the customers who were staggering back, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Chown, you have to know that as a noble giant dragon, only powerful strength can make everyone look up to you, just like your father. Johnson was also in high spirits as he laughed maniacally. He flapped his wings, and the power of the hurricane doubled again. Crassus and Julian, who were at the front of the queue, frowned at the same time. Julian's finger moved. Michael said that he hopes we don't kill people casually, Crassus said calmly. Since when did you listen to others? Julian retracted his finger, and looked at Crassus in surprise. Crassus smiled, and said, I'm very satisfied with what Novin and Michael have done recently. I still want to stay here and teach Amy for a few more years, so I plan to follow the rules and not kill people casually. I've always killed people casually. Julian raised his finger, and the hurricane and pressure created by the giant dragon's dive instantly subsided. However, he did not continue to attack. You can kill them whenever you want. The customers in the queue only calmed down slightly after the hurricane and pressure disappeared. They looked at Julian and Crassus, who were standing at the front of the queue, and felt relieved. When they looked at the 3 red dragons again, their eyes were filled with pity. Weren't they rushing to their deaths? As for the little red dragon, although it had been treated, there were still burn marks on its body. It was obvious how badly it was beaten up yesterday. Mond looked at Chown, and lamented, Boss, you were right. You went easy on them. Even if they didn't die, they would lose a layer of their skin in the hands of Little Boss. It's one thing to shed a layer of skin, but he even brought 2 old people to their deaths. This family really wants to die together. Keel clicked his tongue, taking pleasure in the misfortune of others. Brothers of brothers. By Father. Lava demons. Johnson looked at the 6 lava demons standing together, and was slightly shocked. Although the dragons had always looked down on demons, the lava demons used to be one of the top 10 demon races, and their strength was not to be underestimated. However, he soon realized that there was only one 8th-tier lava demon among these lava demons, and the rest were all 5th-tier and 5th-tier demons. On the other hand, there were 2 8th-tier red dragons on their side. Their strength completely suppressed the other party, and they were instantly emboldened. They spread their wings, and hovered 20 meters above the ground. The 3 giant dragons covered the sky, and almost blocked all the sunlight. All the demons are here. Where is that half-elf bastard? Hurry up and come out to die. Johnson's gaze stopped on Sargeras for a while before he turned to Amy's, and shouted in a deep voice. Ding! The restaurant's door was pushed open, and Amy jumped out with a roast duck leg in her hand. She chewed on it as she looked at the 3 giant dragons in the sky excitedly, and said, Stinky dragon, are you here to give me money again? Don't be in such a hurry. Let me eat a duck leg first. I'll come and beat you to death after I'm done. Johnson, the customers, Meg and the others who followed her out, Crassus looked at Amy with a gratified expression. This fearless personality is similar to mine when I was young. I think it's just the way she eats. Julian pursed his lips and looked at Amy with gratification. This personality is obviously like mine. Fearless. Mag looked up at the 3 giant dragons in the sky. He directly ignored the smaller one. The 2 larger ones were 8th-tier giant dragons, and they were quite powerful. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to defeat them now. That windfall from yesterday was indeed not easy to obtain. Of course, he was not worried at all. After all, the 2 legendary magic casters were arguing about who Amy's personality was like. Could the 2 8th-tier red dragons step on them and do anything to Amy? Mother. She was the one who burned me with the fireball. Chown's voice suddenly became shrill, and he even subconsciously climbed a few meters up. He could not help but tremble when he thought of the fireball that chased after him yesterday. That small body actually contained such terrifying power and powerful magic. If he had not experienced it himself, he would never have believed that there was such a thing. Of course, he was not worried at all now. With his father and mother around, how could that little brat be more powerful than 2 8th-tier giant dragons? Bullshit. You were as timid as a mouse when you were young. Now that you're 20, you don't even dare to kill a chicken. How dare you say you're fearless? Don't you have any shame? Crassus pursed his lips with a mocking expression. You dare to mock me? When you were in your 20s, who was the one who had a crush on Miss Kaylina but did not have the guts to confess? In the end, Johannes beat you to it. Julian asked with a mocking expression. That fellow was killed by me with a blow of my staff. Crassus gritted his teeth. But Miss Kaylina still did not choose you. Julian's smile became more mocking. A terrifying aura began to emanate from the 2 of them. The customers standing in the front row began to step back consciously, and then quietly covered their ears. Although the embarrassing stories of the big bosses were nice to hear, their lives were more important. Some secrets could be fatal if one listened to too much. The red female dragon stared at Amy with her scarlet eyes, and roared, "Little bastard, how dare you hurt my precious son like that? I'm going to swallow you alive today." As soon as she finished speaking, she let out an ear-piercing dragon roar, and opened her bloody mouth as she swooped down toward Amy, who was standing at the entrance of the restaurant. Amy was still holding half a drumstick in her hand as she stared blankly at the giant dragon swooping down. It seemed like it was not enough to fill the gaps between its teeth. Chown's face was filled with excitement, and the blood in his body seemed to be boiling. The customers all stepped aside, afraid that they would be accidentally hurt by the giant dragon. Sargers looked at Crassus and Julian, who were standing in front of Amy. He hesitated for a while, and did not choose to attack. "Go to hell," the female dragon roared, and bit toward Amy. "Noisy. You're affecting our quarrel." Julian raised his magic caster's staff, and casually knocked on the red dragon's head. Chapter 961. Boom. The crimson dragon that was swooping down rapidly was hit in the head by the seemingly light magic caster's staff, but it suddenly plummeted and crashed into the ground as if it had been hit by a ton of force. The ground shook, and a 1-meter-deep pit appeared. That red dragon with a wingspan of dozens of meters twitched twice and stopped moving. "Mother!" Chown exclaimed as he looked at the motionless mother dragon in disbelief. His powerful mother, an 8th-tier giant dragon, was killed by that old man with a single strike. "Wife!" Chow Sun also let out a furious roar, and his eyes instantly turned blood-red. His anger made him lose his mind. He opened his bloody mouth, and a ball of fiery red magma condensed in his throat. The boiling hot aura even caused the surrounding air to turn illusory. "Shut up. If I lose this argument, you'll die." Julian turned back and glanced at Johnson. Cheat! The magma fireball that condensed in Johnson's mouth was extinguished instantly, and a layer of frost appeared around his huge body. Then, he fell straight from the sky and sank deep into the soil with a thud. No one knew whether he was dead or alive. In the blink of an eye, the two menacing 8th-tier giant dragons were buried in the soil just like that. The situation changed so quickly that the onlookers could not wrap their heads around it. Especially the two great magic casters who attacked so casually. They were still arguing about who Little Boss's personality resembled, as though what had just happened had nothing to do with them. This is too strong. The Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire are indeed worthy of their reputation. A legend is a legend. Your grandpa is your grandpa. The guests gradually became restless as they exclaimed incessantly. Father. Chown looked at Johnson, who was sealed in ice, and was completely stunned. His father, who was incomparably powerful in his heart, was sealed in ice so easily. He did not even see how the other party attacked. It was as though he had sealed a fly casually. That kind of power made him feel despair. A 10th-tier great magic caster. A word jumped into his mind. Chown felt as though he had fallen into an ice cave as he looked at the two old men standing at the entrance of the restaurant. Oh. Stinky dragon, I've finished my duck leg. Now, let's have a duel. Right at this moment, Amy threw the duck leg bone in her hand into the bin at the side. She licked her lips and looked at Chown eagerly as she took out her magic caster's staff. Chown was shocked as though he had heard the devil's call. He did not even care about his parents, who were still on the ground, and turned to escape. You came to me. It's too late to run now, Amy said with a smile. A pair of wind-fire wheels appeared under her feet, and her body shot up instantly. In a flash, she appeared above Chown's head. She held her magic caster's staff with both hands and smashed it down forcefully. Bam! With a muffled sound, the giant dragon with a wingspan of more than 20 meters fell from the sky like a bird whose wings had been broken. It crashed into the ground with a loud bang. It struggled for a while before fainting. The three dragons that had come aggressively to denounce Linley were completely defeated before they could even do anything. See, the entrance of the restaurant was silent. Such a situation did not happen often in Chaos City. 2 8th-tier giant dragons and 1 5th-tier giant dragon's fate was unknown. Although this matter started because the giant dragons came to pick a fight, and the ones who attacked were the 2 10th-tier great magic casters, Crassus and Julian, it was still unknown how the Grey Temple would deal with it. Isn't it better to be reasonable? Fighting with 2 great magic casters is just asking for death. In the restaurant, Shirley pursed her lips as she looked at the 2 giant dragons. Amy is really impressive. Anna leaned against the window, and looked at Amy with admiration. Meg shrugged at this scene that was not too unexpected. Then, he coughed softly, and loudly said to the customers who were at a loss, "The restaurant is open for business. Please come in." "Oh, right. Let's eat." The customers suddenly remembered why they were queuing here, and followed into the restaurant. Compared to delicious food, these giant dragons were not worth wasting their time on. After such a huge commotion, the people from the Great Temple naturally arrived very quickly. However, Meg did not have to explain anything. The magic caster in the line went forward to explain the cause and effect of the incident to his colleagues, and the other customers testified unanimously. The 3 giant dragons who came to pick a fight were directly dragged away. Soon, workers from the Blessing restaurant arrived. They repaired the damaged ground, and straightened the fallen trees. The entrance of Mamie restaurant was restored to its original state, as if nothing had happened. However, how could they pretend that nothing had happened after such a huge commotion? The news seemed to have grown wings, and quickly spread throughout the Aiden Square. Have you heard? Just now, 3 8th-tier giant dragons tried to dine and dash at Amy's, and were killed. Really? Even 8th-tier giant dragons were killed. Is that restaurant owner so cruel? Don't you know who is behind him? The Lord of Ice Julian and the Lord of Fire Crassus attacked at the same time. That scene was simply a massacre. I'm scared. Then I'd better not eat there in the future. I feel that my life is in danger. As long as you follow the rules, Mr. Mac and Little Boss are actually very nice. Just remember to pay after eating. People were discussing, and this incident spread to more people's ears. Soon, everyone in the Aiden Square knew one thing: one could not dine and dash at Amy's. Damn it. Why did I come to Amy's again? There are still more than 100 restaurants to eat at. It doesn't seem good to eat at the same restaurant every day. Derek stood in front of Amy's with a conflicted expression on his face. After hesitating for a while, he nodded and muttered to himself, just one bowl of rice shouldn't be a problem, right? Then, I'll try other restaurants. Then, he walked into the restaurant. Half an hour later, Derek walked out of the restaurant and burped. He looked back at Amy's signboard with melancholy, and sighed. Why can't I control my mouth? I said I would only eat one bowl, but I still couldn't help but eat 2 bowls. I even ordered an extra helping of tofu pudding. Forget it. I'll eat at other restaurants tonight. Derek shook his head and turned to leave. System, have you done the conversion? It's such a simple arithmetic problem. Did you take so long to solve it? Meg asked in his mind as he sat on the high stool behind the counter after the lunch service ended. No pop-up window. Chapter 962. According to the system's evaluation, this income is the host's unexpected gain. According to international practice, 20% of the unexpected income tax will be levied. After tax, the total income will be 252 million copper coins. In order to prevent the host from not doing his job properly and giving up his dream of becoming the god of cookery to rob others, this amount of money can only be used to purchase 0.5 strength points. The system's voice sounded. Scram. Do you think you're the world's policeman? You're so nosy. You're even collecting the unexpected income tax for a gourmet system. Meg pursed his lips. The system was getting more and more shameless. Still want 315 million copper coins for 0.5 points of physical strength. Why don't you go rob someone? I earned this money with my own ability. Why should I be discriminated against? Meg was indignant. Host, please take note. This money was earned with your daughter's ability. It has nothing to do with you. The system deeply regrets your behavior of taking advantage of a child. The system said sternly. Meg opened his mouth, but found that the system's words made sense. This money was indeed earned with Amy's ability. I got my daughter with my own ability. Why can't I take advantage of her? Meg quickly convinced himself and said righteously. System, you're short of money, right? Meg calmed down and asked with a smile. The system is indeed short of money recently. The system's voice suddenly weakened by more than half. If you're short of money, just say it. Really, who are we? Here's 310 million copper coins. Take it all and spend it all. Meg said forthrightly. Really? The system's voice trembled slightly. Of course. With our relationship, why would I lie to you? Just give me 20 points of interest every month. Meg nodded with a smile. The system was silent for a while, then roared, Host. You've completely exceeded the scope of a loan shark. This is simply extortion. Don't be so agitated. Isn't this a matter of mutual consent? I'm not forcing you. Look at how beautiful this gem is. Once it's sold, it'll be shiny gold coins. It'll be enough to buy a lot of fertilizer and build a lot of greenhouses. When the vegetables are collected, it'll all be money spent. It'll be more than the interest. Meg continued to smile. The system fell silent again. Forget it if you don't want to lend it. I'll just leave it in the safe. There's nothing to spend money on anyway. Meg said with an indifferent expression. That. Host, can you lower the interest rate a little? 20 points of interest, isn't it too high? This is completely against the laws of the market. The system was silent for a long time before it said weakly. System, have you ever seen a loan shark to the rules of the market to pay? Although I'm a newbie, I have to have professional ethics, Mag said with a smile. Host, you're being ungrateful to me. I gave you a month's interest-free discount for the elephant food bar. Even if you don't pay it back in a month, the interest will only be 4 points. That's not a problem. I'll also give you a 5,000 interest-free limit. Moreover, I'll give you a 4-month interest-free discount. Isn't that better than your discount? However, the rest of the money will still be calculated according to the 20% interest. Meg smiled. The system fell silent again. Think about it. Of course, if you have any new ideas about the price of the strength points, you can talk to me. Meg said with a smile. He got up and walked towards the kitchen, ready to give Phyllis and Anna some advice. Ding! New mission, please capture a fiery pig within 48 hours. Location, Red Dragon Island. Mission reward, red braised meat recipe. Mission failure, 1 strength point deducted. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly rang in Meg's mind. Fuck. System, is this a malicious revenge? Meg stopped in his tracks and raised his eyebrows. Host, please do not misinterpret the system's mission. Complete the mission as soon as possible and you will be rewarded. Treat the mission negatively and you will be punished. The system said seriously. Okay. I'll go. Meg pursed his lips. Speaking of red braised meat, he was still very interested. As a traditional delicacy, it was fatty but not greasy. The sweet and soft red braised meat was one of his favorites. When he ate it, he would have a spoonful of thick soup mixed with rice. Just thinking about the taste made him salivate. However, speaking of Red Dragon Island, 3 red dragons had just been defeated outside Mamie's today. Now, he had to go to their territory to catch a pig immediately. The provocation was indeed a little too strong. However, Shirley had said that there was only 1 10th-tier giant dragon in the Red Dragon tribe. If he brought Ozzy along, even if he couldn't win, it shouldn't be a problem for him to escape. However, Dragon Island wasn't too far away. If he made too much of a commotion, he was afraid that he would attract the attention of other giant dragons. After all, he still had the title of Dragon Slayer on his head now. It wasn't good to be too conspicuous on Dragon Island. Tomorrow happens to be a rest day. Seems like I have to make a trip to Dragon Island, Meg thought to himself. He wasn't too worried. Instead, he was a little expectant. He had long heard that Dragon Island was an archipelago formed by many floating islands. The giant dragons on the Norland continent all lived there. Each tribe had an island. The more powerful the tribe, the closer the island was to the center, and the larger the area. As for whether the system had a vengeful heart, Meg couldn't be bothered to find out. Who didn't have a temper? The more he looked at the system's exasperated look, the more comfortable he felt. Infuriating this kind of system to death. The serf had become the master. Meg entered the kitchen. Phyllis had just finished roasting a beef kebab. She looked at Meg nervously and said, "Boss, can you try the beef kebab I made? You're already confident." Meg looked at the beef kebab in Phyllis's hand with a smile. The beef had just been picked up from the grill, and was still sizzling with oil. The fatty meat had been roasted into a translucent state, and the aroma wafted into his nose. From the outside, it was very close to perfection. Meg was a little surprised. He took the beef kebab, and took a bite. The delicious taste of the beef melted in his mouth, and his eyes lit up. The texture and taste of Phyllis's beef kebab were very close to perfection. It was just a little lacking in the heat control. However, if ordinary beef was replaced with iron copper beef, this flaw would be completely negligible. She could already cook beef kebab for him. Very good. It's ready to be served to customers. Meg nodded with satisfaction. He was indeed very satisfied. Big sister Phyllis is so awesome. Anna clapped her little hands. Is it really ready? Phyllis was still in disbelief. Yes. I didn't expect you to improve so much in just a few days. Meg nodded with a smile. I had a dream last night. In the dream, I kept making beef kebab. When I woke up today, I still remembered everything in the dream. That's why I could make it today. Phyllis said with a hint of embarrassment. I almost forgot that the system gave me a chance to enter the test field for the god of cookery. Meg nodded. No pop-up window. Chapter 963. Elizabeth, are you sure you want to challenge Fox to be the new chief of the Frost Dragon tribe? Douglas asked in a low voice as he looked down at Elizabeth, who was standing in the middle of the majestic hall made of ice and snow. Fox stood not far away from Elizabeth with excitement in his eyes. The 10 elders of the Frost Dragon tribe were all present, and the majestic hall was silent. The gazes of all the dragons landed on Elizabeth. Their expressions varied, but most of them were astonished. Elizabeth was the most powerful among the younger generation of the Frost Dragon tribe. She had just reached adulthood, and was already a 7th-tier giant dragon. She was not inferior to Rankster in the past. Many people thought that she was the best choice to be the next chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. However, Fox was an elder, after all. He was only 500 years old, and was in the prime of his life. He was also at the peak of the 9th tier, and was only a step away from the 10th tier. He had fought with Rankster for the position of chief in the past. Rankster had been missing for many years, and no one knew if he was dead or alive. As a member of the royal family, he was a strong candidate to be the chief successor. Elizabeth had returned to Dragon Island this time, and directly challenged the Great Elder to decide between the two of them to be the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. This decision was beyond everyone's expectations. Yes, I want to challenge him fair and square. Even if I die, I want to die fair and square. I don't want to die from dirty schemes and sneak attacks, Elizabeth said calmly as she looked up at Douglas. A dark look flashed across Fox's eyes, but his expression did not change at all. He had already received the news of those fellows' failure 2 days ago. He thought that his plan was foolproof, but he did not expect that he still could not get rid of Elizabeth. However, it did not matter. Since she wanted to challenge him, he did not mind fulfilling her wish and becoming the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe openly. Disdainful laughter rang out from the crowd, as if what Elizabeth said was a funny joke. Douglas looked at Elizabeth. Her deep blue eyes reminded him of Rankster in the past. That fellow became braver with every setback. He was defeated repeatedly, but could get up again every time. Now, his daughter was standing here again, challenging Fox, who was 2 ranks higher than her. She was just as laughable as Rankster, who had challenged him back then. After that, Rankster became the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe, and he stepped down to become the Great Elder of the Frost Dragon tribe. Was it laughable? Douglas did not think it was funny. It was just like how most of the people who were sitting here in the past ended up becoming Rankster's stepping stones. This was a serious matter. Also, Douglas heard something that he didn't like from Elizabeth's words. He glanced at Fox. This fellow was Rankster's half-brother, and Rankster had spared his life in the final battle. Now, he was trying to secretly kill her behind her back with dirty tricks. Fox lowered his eyes and did not respond. He had been waiting for this day for hundreds of years. A mixed-blood bastard had stolen the throne that should have belonged to him. Now that he was finally dead, how could he allow his daughter to sit on the throne that should have belonged to him? For this, he would do whatever it took. The second elder looked at Douglas and said, "Great Elder, the position of the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe has been empty for many years. We have become the laughingstock of the other dragon tribes. Rankster is most likely dead. Fox and Elizabeth are the best candidates for the new chief. Since Elizabeth took the initiative to challenge Fox, I think it is feasible to decide the new chief through this duel." "I agree." 6 other elders raised their hands one after another. "I object." The 5th elder stood up and said to Douglas, "Great Elder, Elizabeth is the most powerful person among the younger generation of the Frost Dragon tribe. She is also the most promising prodigy to reach the 10th tier in 100 years. She is still young, and her abilities are much weaker than Fox. This is not a fair duel at all. Even if the winner is decided, how can the others be convinced?" "I also agree with the 5th elder. Elizabeth is still young. Even if we want a duel, we have to wait for another few decades. We have to let her reach the 9th tier at least and be on the same level as Fox. Only then will the duel be acknowledged by all the members of the tribe. Let the other dragons be the laughingstock. How can it shake the position of the Frost Dragon tribe as one of the top 10 dragon tribes?" The 7th elder said as he stood up. "What a joke. If we wait for another few decades, won't the Frost Dragon tribe have to be without a chief for the next few decades? If Elizabeth can't break through to the 9th tier after a few hundred years, are we going to make Fox wait?" 5th elder, 7th elder, this is a challenge initiated by Elizabeth herself. What are you trying to do by objecting like this?" The 2nd elder shouted at the 2 dragons. "Enough." Douglas stopped everyone's quarrel. He looked at Fox and said, "Fox, do you dare to accept Elizabeth's challenge?" Fox raised his eyes and glanced at Elizabeth. Then, he looked at Douglas and respectfully said, "Since Elizabeth wants to challenge me to choose a new chief for the Frost Dragon tribe, Fox is willing to accept the challenge and bear all the consequences." "All right. The 2 of you will duel at the Frost battlefield tomorrow afternoon," Douglas said in a low voice. "Great Elder." The 5th elder and 7th elder still wanted to say something. "It's settled. The Frost Dragon tribe has always spoken with our abilities." Douglas raised his hand, and then disappeared from the spot. The other elders also disappeared one after another. "Farewell, elders." Fox bowed. When he straightened his body, he was already full of smiles. He turned and walked towards Elizabeth. He stopped beside her and smilingly said, "You shouldn't have come back. If you had hidden like your father, I really wouldn't have been able to do anything to you. One day, I will kill you." Elizabeth clenched her fists slowly, and turned to look at Fox calmly. Fox's expression froze, and then he sneered. He went closer to Elizabeth and said, "But you don't have the chance now. I will kill you tomorrow." Fox turned and walked out of the hall. He opened his arms and transformed into a frost dragon. He flapped his wings and flew away. "Father said that as long as I'm alive, there's still a chance." In the empty hall, Elizabeth opened her right hand, and a frost dragon source that emitted a cold aura appeared in her palm. "Father, where are we going today?" Amy, who was riding on Meg's neck, asked excitedly. They had left the city early in the morning, and were now walking on a small path in the mountains. Chapter 964. Translator, Henry Translations Editor. Henry Translations keep a low profile. See, page 1/1, we are going to Dragon Island today to catch a pig. After that, we will come back to make some delicious red braised pork for Amy, Meg said with a smile. After some consideration, he still decided to bring Amy along. After all, there was only one day off a week, so he had to bring Amy out to have some fun. The fiery pig was a type of magic beast that only lived on Fire Dragon Island. It was the red dragon's favorite food. It evolved from the unique volcanic environment of Fire Dragon Island, and had 4th-tier power. Even the current Meg could easily deal with a 4th-tier power. However, Dragon Island was such an interesting place. It was not a bad idea to bring Amy along to see the world. Anyway, Ozzy was around, so there shouldn't be any dangerous situations. If they couldn't beat them, they could just avoid them. Dragon Island. Amy's eyes lit up. Then, she asked expectantly, "Then, are we going to look for little Ozzy now?" "I love Ozzy the most." "Yes. Dragon Island is very far from Chaos City. We have to rely on Ozzy to get there." Meg nodded with a smile. If it wasn't for Ozzy, they would have to spend more than 48 hours on the road, let alone catching a fiery pig. Meg carried Amy up the mountain. When they were about halfway up the mountain, he helped Amy and himself change into clothes and put on masks. After that, he took out a small whistle from his pocket and blew hard into it. It made a long and thin whistle that sounded like the chirping of a bird. After a while, a purple-striped griffin flew out from the cave at the top of the mountain and swooped straight down. It circled around Meg and Amy happily before landing lightly on the ground. It rubbed its head against Meg's hand. Amy reached out her little hand with a smile and said, "Be good, Ozzy. Give me your head and let me stroke it." A vigilant look appeared in Ozzy's eyes immediately. When it saw Amy's smile gradually disappearing, it stretched its head over again as if its head would explode if it was a second later. "Good girl," Amy said with a smile as she patted Ozzy's head. Ozzy's expression changed from vigilance to enjoyment. She turned over and revealed her belly. "No matter what, you are still a 10th-tier griffin. Can't you be a little more mature?" Meg said helplessly. However, looking at the two kids playing happily, a smile appeared on his face. "All right, let's set off. The Dragon Island is still quite far away." Meg smiled as he picked up Amy. Ozzy flipped over again, and Meg jumped onto the back of the griffin. With a flap of his powerful wings, he soared into the sky and flew straight into the sea of clouds. Then, he flew toward the south. The Dragon Island was located directly south of Chaos City. The wilderness, which was filled with all kinds of magic beasts, was like a natural barrier that stopped most people from going to the Dragon Island. Giant dragons disdained to explore the wilderness. Dragon Island was rich in resources, and was the richest place on the Norland continent. Looking down at the wilderness from high up in the sky, one could see the huge magic beasts hunting for food in the wilderness. One could also see groups of mercenaries hunting the magic beasts, as well as mercenaries being hunted by the magic beasts. Scenes like this kept happening in the wastelands. The roles of hunter and prey could be reversed at any time, but adventurers and mercenaries were still happy to dive into the wastelands and reap great rewards from the extreme danger. The deeper they went into the wilderness, the fewer mercenaries there were, and the more powerful auras there were. Meg could sense the auras of a few 9th-tier magic beasts. There was even a 10th-tier magic beast's aura. When Ozzy flew past, it let out a violent roar with a strong sense of territory. Wow, so there are so many magic beasts in the wilderness. They look like little ants. Amy lay on the griffin's back and looked down curiously. Then, she patted the griffin's back gently, and egged it on. Little Ozzy, let's fly closer and see what they look like. Ozzy saw that Meg didn't object, so it dove down and flew close to the dense forest. It spun through the narrow canyon, flew over the heads of the 9th-tier magic beasts, and sped through the forest with a 10th-tier giant python on its back. Amy cheered. It's a good helper to take care of children. Meg shook his head with a smile as he looked at the giant python that had finally given up its pursuit and smashed half a mountain with its tail. They teased all kinds of magic beasts along the way and passed through all kinds of dangerous places. It was a high-energy journey, but they didn't feel bored at all. Of course, this was also because of Ozzy's 10th-tier power and unparalleled speed. Otherwise, even a 10th-tier powerhouse would be severely injured if they didn't die. After about 2 hours, the land turned into a blue sea. Wow, so much water. Father, is that the sea that you were talking about? It's blue, it's so beautiful. Amy's eyes lit up, and she said with joy. Yes, this is the sea. Meg nodded. The boundless sea opened up one's mind. Then, are there mermaids in this sea too? Will we be able to meet them? Amy asked curiously. Maybe, but it's not that easy to meet mermaids, Meg said with a smile. Then I'll call them. Amy made a trumpet with her 2 little hands and shouted toward the sea, Mermaids, I'm Amy. Hello. Plop. A dolphin jumped out of the water, and then a group of dolphins also jumped out of the water, as if in response to Amy's words. Wow, wow, so cute. The smile on Amy's face became even brighter. Meg sat at the side and watched with a smile. With Amy by his side, this leisurely trip was really too comfortable. Father, look, those rocks are floating in the air. Amy said as she pointed to the sky in the distance. Meg looked up and saw a black spot in the sky in the distance gradually becoming clearer. Several floating islands thousands of meters above the sea appeared in Meg's sight. Is that Dragon Island? Meg's eyes gradually widened. Even though he had already seen many incredible things after coming to the alternate world, Meg was still astounded when he saw those huge islands that were half hidden in the fog floating in midair. Can we go up and take a look? Amy turned to Meg with anticipation. Roar! A dragon's roar sounded, and a huge dragon with a wingspan of over 100 meters flew over and disappeared among those islands. Of course. This is the destination of our trip. Meg nodded with a smile, and then patted the griffin's back gently. Ozzy, keep a low profile. It's best not to be discovered by the giant dragons. Let's go to Red Dragon Island. How? Ozzy let out a soft roar, and with a flap of its wings, it flew toward Dragon Island. It avoided the small sharp rocks below and plunged into the fog. Huge floating islands, giant dragons could be seen everywhere, and the dragon's roar could be heard from afar. The pressure of powerhouses was everywhere. This was Dragon Island, the gathering place of the strongest race on the Norland continent. Ozzy glided past the periphery. Not far away, a red island with smoke coming out of it appeared in Meg's sight. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 965. Red Dragon Jonathan and his family have committed the crime of causing trouble and endangering public safety. The evidence is conclusive, and the punishment for both crimes is as follows: imprisonment in the Bawtai prison for 3 years. After the imprisonment, they will not be allowed to enter Chaos City for 3 years. In the Great Temple, the judge announced the punishment in front of everyone. We don't belong to Chaos City. You have no right to punish us. I want to see your city lord. Have you thought about the consequences of doing this? The Red Dragons will not accept such a punishment so easily. Jonathan shouted agitatedly, and the metal chains on his body clanged loudly. Chown and his mother also looked a little flustered. The trauma of almost dying yesterday was still fresh in their minds, and now they were going to be imprisoned for 3 years in humiliation. For such a thing to happen to the noble giant dragons was as uncomfortable as being killed. Chaos City's laws are set up to protect the safety of Chaos City's residents. As long as you step into Chaos City, regardless of race or identity, you have to abide by it. If the red dragons have any dissatisfaction, you can raise it to Chaos City. However, this will not affect the verdict at all. Your protest is invalid, the judge said calmly as he glanced at Jonathan before turning to leave. The Grey Temple's knights went forward, and escorted the 3 red dragons away to the Bowtie prison. They would be spending 3 years there. Since it was a reformation, they would not die, but they would definitely lose a layer of skin. I was wrong. I shouldn't have eaten a free meal. I will never eat a free meal in my life. Boo-hoo. Chown finally broke down as he cried and wailed. How dare you eat a free meal from Mamie's? You must be tired of living, one of the knights in charge of escorting them mumbled. Inform the red dragons that they don't have to waste their time. Not a day less than 3 years. Also, tell them that they are already lucky to be able to escape from the hands of the Lord of Ice and the Lord of Fire. If they don't want to be wiped out, they should not provoke Mamie's anymore. It's too troublesome to collect their corpses, Branley instructed a staff member outside the court. Yes, that staff member answered, and left quickly. Chown. Look at me. As a real red dragon, I will never lose my dignity and ideals because of this. However, 3 years is just a nap for us dragons. You should remember this humiliation. When you are strong enough in the future, you can return this humiliation in double, Johnson yelled at Chown, who was lying limp in the corner with a dejected expression. But father, the chest of treasures you gave me, is all gone, Chown said softly, still a little depressed. Fool, that's just a small chest of treasures. In the long lifespan of a dragon, you can collect much more treasures than this. When we return to Red Dragon Island this time, father will give you a chest of treasures with more treasures than before. The mother dragon stroked Chown's head with a smile. Yes. Yes. Xiao Xin forced a smile. Great. Then I'll have my treasures again. Chown's eyes were filled with surprise. Fire Dragon Island was located at the edge of the Dragon Island archipelago. The Fire Dragon tribe was not considered a strong tribe among the dragon tribes, so they could only live at the edge of the Dragon Island for many years. However, even the Red Dragon tribe, which was ranked at the bottom of the dragon tribes, still had 10th-tier dragons in their tribe. This also proved the strength of the entire dragon tribe. They had the largest number of high-end combat forces. A towering active volcano stood in the center of Fire Dragon Island. Boiling lava gushed out from the crater from time to time. The entire Red Dragon Island looked a little gray because of the volcanic ash. The visibility was extremely low, and the air was filled with the smell of sulfur and ashes. The purple-striped griffin quietly landed on the northwest side of the active volcano. The purple-striped griffin concealed its aura along the way, so it wasn't discovered by any giant dragons. Its powerful divine sense also allowed it to avoid all the possible enemies that it might encounter. Just like that, it arrived at its destination without any mishaps. Meg bought 2 dust masks from the system and put them on. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. This kind of environment was not suitable for humans at all. Father, where are the pigs that we are looking for? Amy jumped down from the griffin's back and looked around curiously. They should be around here. Meg also looked around. The fiery pig was born on Red Dragon Island. It liked the heat and fed on volcanic ash. It was the favorite food of the red dragon. It was half wild and half domesticated, so there should be a lot of them. Roar! Right at this moment, 2 dragon roars came from the side. Meg hid behind a huge rock with Amy in his arms, and Ozzy followed suit. They retracted their wings so that they didn't look too conspicuous. 2 little red dragons flew down from the volcano and flew over Meg and the others' heads. Then, they swooped down. Soon, there was a commotion below. The ground shook slightly as if a group of large animals were being chased away. Even the ground was trembling slightly. 2 stinky dragons. Father, are we going to take care of these stinky dragons on the way today? Amy's eyes lit up as she asked eagerly. No, we're not here to fight today. Meg shook his head and said with a smile, besides, although they look very similar, these 2 little red dragons didn't do anything bad. So, we can't beat them up casually. That would be no different from the stinky dragons. Is that so? Amy understands. Amy nodded thoughtfully. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. She pointed ahead and said, Father, look. Is that the pig that they're holding in their hands, the pig we're looking for? Meg followed Amy's finger and looked. His eyes also lit up. The flaming pig that was being held in the claws of the 2 red dragons was their target, the fiery pig. So it's down there. Meg was deep in thought. He started walking down the volcano with Amy. The scorching heat hit them in the face. Fortunately, Amy cast a freezing spell in time to offset the heat. Otherwise, it would have been a little unbearable. After walking down for a while, Meg suddenly stopped. He pointed at a fiery pig that was stirring up volcanic ash and whispered, Shoo, look what we found. There's a lone fiery pig over there. Its meat is exceptionally plump, but fiery pigs aren't easy to deal with. Let's quietly approach it from behind. Don't make any noise. Meg and Amy quietly approached the fiery pig. Before Meg could make a move, Amy had already hit the fiery pig's head with her club. It didn't struggle at all. It died peacefully. Yes, that's it. Hit it from the back, and then drag it away. Meg nodded with a complicated expression as he dragged the dead pig up the mountain. Chapter 966. The mission was completed without any surprises or danger. Meg didn't even have time to feel the fiery boar's headache-inducing flames. Father, are we going to roast or boil this boar? Amy asked expectantly as she looked at the fiery boar in Meg's hand. This boar is mainly used to make red braised pork. It's a cooking method different from roasting and boiling. I'll make it for Amy when we get back to the restaurant, Meg replied with a smile. This fiery boar was about 150 kilograms. Its fur was blood red, and it had a pair of sharp white fangs. Its fur was longer than that of a wild boar, and its body was also more slender. Speaking of being particular, the system was indeed particular. To make a dish of red braised pork, the main ingredient was a level 4 magical beast, and it was only produced on the Red Dragon Island. If the Red Dragon Island's fiery pig was eaten up, the red dragons would cry to death. Of course, Meg, who didn't have a good impression of Red Dragon Island, naturally wouldn't feel guilty about this. Meg carried the fiery boar and climbed back to the mountainside with Amy. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard a conversation coming from the other side of the mountain. Meg and Amy walked over stealthily, sticking close to the rocks. They poked their heads out to take a look. It turned out that the 2 little red dragons who caught the fiery boar earlier were talking as they ate it. Have you heard? Chown, that fool, brought his father and mother to Chaos City to smash someone's restaurant yesterday. In the end, they lost and were arrested. I don't know when they will be released. Ha ha ha. Chown, that fool. It's not surprising that something like this happened to him. However, Lord Johnson is an 8th-tier giant dragon. He couldn't even smash a restaurant. He was even caught. Isn't that too embarrassing? The two little red dragons laughed, gloating over Johnson's misfortune. Seems like they're talking about the family of 3 from yesterday. Meg was deep in thought. The news came rather quickly. Just as Meg was about to leave with Amy, a little red dragon suddenly said, "Say, if they don't come back, do you think their cave on the 5th peak will be occupied by other giant dragons? That's a super big cave." "I don't think so. Sir Chiao Sen must have accumulated a lot of treasures. If they are taken by other people, he will not let it go when he returns," another little red dragon said. Meg's lips curled into a smile as he picked up Amy and walked towards Ozzy. "Father, are we going back now?" Amy asked. "No, we still have to go to a place on the way to earn some living expenses." Meg smiled and shook his head. He stuck close to the fiery boar and carried Amy onto the griffin's back. He whispered, "Ozzy, let's go to the cave in the middle of the 5th mountain." Ozzy flapped its wings and swooped down. Like a sharp arrow, it pierced into the hole in the center of the 5th mountain peak. Pop! A soft pop came from the hole, but it did not affect Ozzy in the slightest. The tunnel inside the cave was very wide. Even Ozzy, with its wingspan of over 100 meters, could easily pass through it. The stone walls were inlaid with luminous pearls, illuminating the passage. At the end of the passage, there was a magnificent hole. Precious gems were casually placed, reflecting dazzling light, dazzling the eyes of those who looked at them. Wow! There are so many gems. Amy looked around, her eyes sparkling. "System, I want to deposit something." Meg's lips slowly curled up. After taking these gems, there was no need for this trip. "Host, your actions are immoral. As a righteous system, I cannot associate myself with you and do such a thing that goes against morality and the law," the system said sternly. "Tell me, how much do you want for 1 cubic meter of storage? Anything higher than 500 copper coins is off the table." Meg picked up a sapphire and looked at it before curling his lips. 499 copper coins, the system said a little weakly. "Deal." Meg put down the sapphire casually and nodded. There were more gems in this haul than in the chest that Amy had seized the day before, but the 2 8th-tier dragons' collection should not be limited to just this. Meg walked around the hall, then pushed away a huge golden chair placed high up, and a hidden tunnel appeared. Meg walked into the tunnel with Amy. After violently tearing down a metal door, a large treasure vault was revealed. Gold and gems were piled up into a small mountain, and Meg was a little dazzled. "System, take it all. Don't even leave a single luminous pearl for illumination. I'll give you an extra 1,000 copper coins for the removal fee." Meg nodded in satisfaction, then turned and left with Amy in his arms. "Host, you're a little too much," the system said quietly. "Too much. You have to pay for what you're doing. I'll just take it that I'm collecting money for the bosses that they ate and dashed in the past." Meg looked calm. The purple-striped griffin flew out of the cave. Only holes were left in the magnificent cave abode, and not even a single luminous pearl was left. Even the huge golden dragon chair was taken away. "I received my first treasure from your grandfather when I came of age. In the hundreds of years that followed, my treasure kept increasing. This kind of joy is indescribable. Treasure is my life, and they have become an indispensable part of my life. On Red Dragon Island, my treasure can be ranked in the top 10. This has given me a high status in the tribe," Jorson said proudly. Johnson looked at John proudly. "John, you will be the inheritor of my wealth in the future." "Father, I'll work hard." Jorson's eyes gradually lit up, and he nodded vigorously. Frost colossal dragons surrounded the frost battlefield in the center of Frost Dragon Island. Today, in this frost battlefield, Elizabeth and Fox would decide the new chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. This was a very important matter to the Frost Dragon tribe, so all the members of the tribe came here. The chief's position had been vacant for 3 years, so it was expected that a new chief would be chosen. However, this duel was also quite controversial among the Frost Dragon tribe. Although Elizabeth was the most powerful one among the younger generation, she was still 2 levels lower than Fox. A 7th tier versus an 8th tier was not a fair duel. Silence. Douglas appeared on the platform, and his voice reverberated throughout the entire Frost Dragon Island. He looked at the dragons, and said in a deep voice, "Today, Elizabeth challenged Fox to a duel to decide the new chief of the Frost Dragon tribe, and Fox accepted the challenge. After the elders voted, they agreed to this duel. The winner of this duel will become the new chief. Come on, Elizabeth, Fox." A frost dragon with a wingspan of 100 meters swooped down toward the center of the frost battlefield. Fox was already standing in the center of the battlefield when he retracted his wings. Tens of meters away, a snowflake-like pattern lit up, and Elizabeth walked out of thin air. She looked at Fox coldly. Elizabeth has advanced to 8th tier. Right at this moment, an elder exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 967. 8th tier. All the frost dragons on the frost battlefield were shocked as they looked at Elizabeth, who was standing in the middle of the battlefield, in disbelief. It had been less than a year since she broke through to the 7th tier, and Elizabeth actually broke through again and successfully advanced to the 8th tier. This speed of advancement was really too shocking. Although the Frost Dragon tribe was one of the top 10 dragon tribes, and had 10 10th tier elders, a 8th tier giant dragon could still be called the top expert in the tribe. Among the frost dragons who were under 200 years old, there was not a single one who had successfully advanced to the 8th tier. And now, Elizabeth was only 19 years old, but she had already successfully advanced to the 8th tier, displaying shocking and terrifying talent. It was hard not to think of the legend who had once turned the Frost Dragon tribe upside down, Rankster. And Elizabeth was his daughter. A 19-year-old 8th tier giant dragon. It was hard to imagine what heights she would grow to in the future. Would she be on par with her father? Or would she surpass her father? There was a commotion in the frost battlefield. How is this possible? The second elder cried out in surprise. Elizabeth had actually broken through to the 8th level in a single night. This was simply too inconceivable. All the elders could not hide their shock as well. The appearance of such a prodigy was naturally a good thing for the Frost Dragon tribe. However, Elizabeth was about to have a life-and-death duel with Fox now. The arrow was already on the bow, and it had to be released. No one knew what the outcome would be. Is it the Frost Dragon source? Rankster indeed left something behind for Elizabeth. It's just that this lass is too impatient. If she had waited another 10 years and advanced to the 9th tier before challenging Fox, the outcome would be uncertain then. Douglas looked at Elizabeth with pity in his eyes. Elizabeth, your talent really surprises me. It even reminds me of your father. Fox looked at Elizabeth, and the shock in his eyes was quickly replaced by mockery. However, it's a pity that 8th tier is 8th tier. You may never understand the difference between 9th tier and 8th tier. If I live to be 500 years old, I won't just be a 9th tier, Elizabeth said calmly to Fox. There was not a hint of panic in her voice. Very well. I hope you won't regret the decision you made today. You won't have the chance to live past today. Fox said coldly. He raised his hand, and the space around Elizabeth was instantly surrounded by ice and snow. It was like a cage that was rapidly shrinking towards Elizabeth. Elizabeth's glabella lit up, and her expression turned solemn. She swiped her left hand at the ice wall in front of her. Like a sharp knife cutting through the ice wall, a crack appeared on the seemingly indestructible ice wall, and Elizabeth walked out of the crack. "It seems that I have underestimated you." Fox withdrew his right hand and spread out his arms, instantly transforming into a frost dragon that was 100 meters long. He flapped his wings and soared into the air, opening his mouth to spit out countless icicles at Elizabeth. A snowflake array appeared under Elizabeth's feet, and she disappeared the moment the icicles hit the ground. She then reappeared in the sky hundreds of meters away, turning into a slimmer frost dragon with a wingspan of nearly 90 meters. With a flap of her wings, wind blades mixed with hail swept toward Fox. "You're courting death." Fox roared and did not dodge. He rushed straight toward the wind blades and hail, and a layer of ice crystal armor appeared on his body. Ding ding ding. With a series of clinking sounds, a layer of Fox's ice crystal armor was shaved off. He rushed over without suffering any substantial damage, and arrived in front of Elizabeth in the blink of an eye. His sharp dragon claws were suffused with a cold silver light, and they were like sharp swords that grabbed at Elizabeth. Elizabeth turned around gracefully, trying to avoid them. However, Fox's speed was obviously faster. The sharp claws left 3 bloody marks on her back, and Elizabeth's body fell straight down. Whoosh! Cries of surprise rang out in the frost battlefield. Was this duel going to end so soon? However, just as Elizabeth was about to land on the ground, she spread her wings again and completed a somersault close to the ground. The chanting sound echoed throughout the frost battlefield. The falling snowflakes suddenly stopped, and time seemed to have stopped. Even the expressions on everyone's faces froze for a moment. Then, icicles appeared above Fox's head and fell like a storm of pear blossoms. Pfft! The sharp icicles pierced through the thick ice armor and into his flesh, and blood instantly splattered everywhere. Fox, who was full of pride, showed a painful expression. His body swayed, and he hurriedly dodged the icicles. He flipped over and shook off the icicles that were nailed to his body, and he looked at Elizabeth with resentment. "Great!" The dragons cheered. Elizabeth's desperate counterattack was amazing. In a situation where the difference in strength was obvious, it was already very impressive that her attack was effective. The first exchange of blows had already spilled blood on the frost battlefield. This duel was destined to be exciting. And this exchange of blows also seemed to be the prelude to the duel. Elizabeth and Fox began to attack each other crazily. Icicles and ice blades flew all over the sky. It was an absolutely violent collision, and hot blood was spilled all over the frost battlefield. The frost dragons were completely ignited, and their cheers rang throughout the Dragon Island. "What's so lively about?" After taking away all of Johnson's family's treasures, Meg, who was about to return with a full load, looked in the direction of Frost Dragon Island with some surprise. "Father, let's go and take a look." Amy was also full of curiosity. She loved to watch a good show. Meg thought for a while, and nodded. "Okay. Z, try to fly higher. There's no need to enter the airspace of Frost Dragon Island directly." Meg said to Z, and then said in his mind, "System, give me 2 high-powered binoculars. The farther, the better." The purple-striped griffin flew higher and higher into the sky. It was so high that it was difficult to see this black dot from the Dragon Island. Normal dragons wouldn't fly to this height either. "Okay, just stay here and don't move." Meg took out a small binoculars and handed it to Amy. Amy turned it over and put it in front of her. She looked at Meg and exclaimed, "Father, how did you become so small?" Amy took it upside down. Meg smiled as he helped Amy rewind the binoculars. He pointed downwards, and took one for himself to look down. Wow, two white dragons are fighting. However, why did that white dragon look so familiar? It looks like Big Sister Elizabeth. Amy learned how to use the binoculars and looked down. Soon, she exclaimed. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 968. It's not like, it's her. Meg looked at the center of Frost Dragon Island where the two Ice Blast WYRMS were fighting. Among them, the slender one had a crystal snowflake on its head, which was something that the other Ice Blast WYRMS did not have. They're all the same. Why are they fighting? Amy asked, puzzled. Maybe it's because of some duel. Meg looked at the Ice Blast WYRMS around him. It was obviously an open duel. However, he could not guess the exact reason. The battle was very tragic. The two Ice Blast WYRMS were covered in wounds, and blood dyed the white frost battlefield red. Both sides were seriously injured. However, the battle seemed to be coming to an end. Elizabeth's opponent was obviously stronger than her. He slapped her down from the sky with his tail, and she crashed into the ice. Although Elizabeth spat out an icicle before landing, and it also pierced the wings of the Ice Blast WYRM, Elizabeth, who was lying on the ground and unable to move, was obviously more seriously injured. With a flash of light, she transformed into her human form and struggled to stand up. The cheers in the frost battlefield had already stopped. The Ice Blast WYRMS were looking at Elizabeth, who was lying in a pool of blood and trying to stand up, with respect in their eyes. It was not a fair duel. Elizabeth, who had just broken through to level 8, was fighting against Fox, who had perfected level 9, as if they were evenly matched. If they had not seen the battle today, no one would have believed that a battle between a level 8 and a level 9 would be like that. However, although Elizabeth had shown amazing strength and tenacity, the difference in strength still determined the outcome of the battle. Fox used his claws to pull out the huge icicle that had pierced into his wings, and threw it aside. He looked at Elizabeth, who was lying in a pool of blood below, and sneered. "You can't defeat me. I'm the chief of the Ice Blast WYRM tribe. Now, I'm going to take back what your father took away back then." Elizabeth forced herself to sit up. She looked up at Fox and sneered. "Back then, you were not fit to be the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. Now, you are still not fit, just like how you would never dare to challenge the Great Elder. Back then, my father dared to do so. In the future, I will also dare to do so. But you will never dare to. Shut up. Right now, I'm going to kill you." Fox roared hysterically. He opened his mouth and a ball of sparkling light began to condense in his mouth. Many of the onlooking frost dragons turned their heads to the side, not wanting to see this scene. This was a battle of life and death agreed upon by both sides. Even the Great Elder had no right to interfere. The fifth elder stood up, and agitatedly said to Douglas, "Great Elder, Elizabeth could be the pillar of our Frost Dragon tribe in the next 1,000 years. We can't just watch her die like this. There's no one else in the younger generation who can stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Great Elder, are you going to watch the hope of our Frost Dragon tribe be destroyed just like that?" The seventh elder also looked at Douglas with a pained expression. "Elders, don't forget that this is a battle of life and death that Elizabeth proposed. Forcefully interfering now is going against the rules of the Frost Dragon tribe," the second elder said coldly to the two elders. Douglas looked at Elizabeth with a frown, but he did not say anything. "Father, let's help Sister Elizabeth. She looks so pitiful." "She's our guest," Amy pleaded as she tugged at Meg's clothes. Meg, who had planned to pass by after watching the show, hesitated for a while when he heard Amy's words. However, he still nodded. Let's have a celestial pig descend from the sky then. Meg looked down with the binoculars, and then threw the fiery pig that was hanging on the griffin's tail down. Amy, hide behind my cloak and hug me tightly. No matter what happens, don't poke your head out, and don't let go. Meg sat down, and grabbed a scale on Ozzy's neck. Okay. Amy answered. She lifted Meg's cloak and went in. Then, she hugged Meg tightly from behind. Ozzy, dive down. We'll retreat after we save her. Meg patted the purple-striped griffin lightly. Awoo! Ozzy raised its head and roared. Its head plunged down, and it made a sonic boom as it pierced straight down toward Frost Dragon Island. Elizabeth was killed, and Fox became the new chief. It seemed to have become an unchangeable fact and result. Although the Frost Dragon tribe revered the strong, they still felt sorry for Elizabeth. As the only daughter of Rankster, her strength and tenacity were awe-inspiring. However, a rule that even the Great Elder could not break, so who could save her? Elizabeth knelt in the pool of blood, and looked at Fox, who was accumulating power to release the last attack. What appeared in her mind was not her father whom she had been looking for, but Yabamiya. That idiot, I didn't tell her clearly. I don't know if she'll keep the ring and not open it. Probably, she's so stupid. But, this seems pretty good, at least she can live comfortably. Elizabeth thought to herself. Go to hell. From today onwards, I'm the chief of the Frost Dragon tribe. No one can stop me anymore. Fox looked at Elizabeth with madness in his eyes. The light in his mouth was already very dazzling, and no one would stop him. He could enjoy this moment to his heart's content. Wow! Look, what's falling from the sky? A little dragon among the dragons exclaimed in surprise. Many giant dragons raised their heads and saw a fiery red object descending from the sky. All of them were astonished to see it. It's heading towards Fox. What a terrifying speed. Soon, another giant dragon exclaimed. That thing was like a meteorite from outer space, falling at a terrifying speed towards Fox, who was hovering in midair. What? Fox also felt something falling from above, but before he could turn his head, that thing had already landed on his back. Crack! The sound of bones cracking could be heard clearly. The frost dragon with a wingspan of more than 100 meters was smashed into the ground by a giant hammer from the sky. Boom! The ground shook, and ice shards flew everywhere. If I'm not wrong, that seems to be a flying fiery pig. A frost dragon swallowed his saliva and said in disbelief. The entire frost battlefield fell into an eerie silence. Bang! A sound broke the silence. A black dot appeared in the vision of all the dragons. In the blink of an eye, it was already above their heads, and a purple-striped griffin appeared in everyone's sight. That's... All the frost dragons widened their eyes as they looked at that purple-striped griffin in disbelief. Purple-striped griffin. The 10 great elders also stood up abruptly, their faces full of vigilance. I'm going to save this dragon. A deep voice rang out. Chapter 969. That voice wasn't loud, but it traveled clearly into the ears of every frost dragon. It was deafening. Fox, who was still high and mighty and prepared to deal the final blow to Elizabeth, was now smashed into the ice pit, and couldn't move. That wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. A declaration that Elizabeth's life belonged to him. Alex. A legendary name appeared in their minds, and the eyes of all the dragons widened. Apart from shock, they were also in disbelief. Alex, whose name shook the Norland continent because of his dragon slaying, was seen as the most dangerous knight by the giant dragons. None of the giant dragons that died under his sword were nameless. Although most of them were the scum of Dragon Island, the ones who could do evil were all dragons with outstanding strength. However, none of the dragons could escape Alex's punishment. Even the giant dragons who thought highly of themselves had to admit that man's power. And to the frost dragons, this kind of power was even more direct. Because just 5 years ago, Alex had defeated the most powerful member of the frost dragon tribe, Rankster, on this frost battlefield. All the giant dragons of the frost dragon tribe were present in that battle. They saw their king being defeated with their own eyes. That kind of power was enough to make all the giant dragons feel helpless. At that time, that man was riding on this purple-striped griffin. And now, he was back. Howl. A unique and loud howl accompanied by an ear-piercing sonic boom sounded. The purple-striped griffin appeared on the frost battlefield in a flash. It spread its wings, and flew close to the inner circle of the frost battlefield. The strong wind that it created made all the frost dragons retreat pathetically. Finally, it landed lightly beside Elizabeth. The purple-striped griffin was glowing with a purple-gold luster, and it was dazzling under the sunlight. Its domineering and awe-inspiring posture made the WIRMS feel slightly shocked. It was just a mount, yet it had such a powerful aura. And on the griffin's back sat a straight figure. That legendary longsword was beside him. Although he was wearing a mask, all the giant dragons present were sure that he was Alex. The frost battlefield was silent. The frost dragons looked at Alex uneasily. He had appeared on Frost Dragon Island again after 3 years. Why was he here? Fox, who had just defeated Elizabeth to become the new chief, was smashed to death by a fiery pig. Without Rankster, who could stop him? Alex. Elizabeth also stared at the figure sitting on the purple-striped griffin in disbelief. She had thought that she was going to die at Fox's hands, but who would have thought that she would be saved by Alex, whom she had always regarded as her nemesis? This feeling made her feel a little dazed for a moment. Her father's depression disappeared, and her mother died of depression. In her heart, the culprit had always been Alex. In her heart, the biggest motivation for her cultivation was to be able to defeat Alex one day. 3 years ago, Alex's sudden death had a huge impact on her. She had even lost the goal to work hard for. However, Alex's reappearance some time ago had reignited her passion and flame for cultivation. But now, she had yet to reach the level where she could challenge him, and he was going to save her. Elizabeth looked at that figure with complicated feelings. She really didn't want to die. She still had many things to do, and the most important one was to defeat this man in front of her. Seems a little too high profile. Meg thought to himself embarrassedly as he felt the tense atmosphere around him. Then, he looked at Fox, who had fainted after being smashed into a bloody mess by the fiery pig, and decided to say something to ease the atmosphere. "This is your new chief. Seems a little terrible." The frost battlefield was still silent. The frost dragons glared with anger burning in their eyes, but they didn't dare to say anything. However, the chief of the frost dragons was knocked unconscious by a fiery pig that fell from the sky. If news of this got out, they would probably become the laughingstock of Dragon Island, right? Douglas took a step forward and looked at Meg with a frown. In a deep voice, he shouted, "Alex, you came uninvited and ruined the showdown between the chiefs of the Frost Dragons. Are you declaring war on the Frost Dragons? She's the daughter of an old friend. Since I've seen her, I naturally can't leave her be. Since all of you want to see her die, then I'll take her away." Meg looked up at Douglas before sweeping his gaze across the 10 elders on the platform. He calmly said, "Who dares to stop me?" The expressions of the Frost Dragon elders changed drastically, and their faces flushed red. However, none of them dared to step forward when they saw Meg sitting upright on the purple-striped griffin's back. Douglas's brows were tightly knitted, but he didn't say anything. Aussie. Meg patted the purple-striped griffin gently. The purple-striped griffin's wings wrapped around Elizabeth gently before throwing her back. Meg then carried Elizabeth in his arms. "Let's go," Meg said calmly. "Howl." The purple-striped griffin issued a loud and clear cry. It flapped its wings, and flew towards the high platform where the 10 elders were seated. It issued a sonic boom, and became a small black dot in the sky in the blink of an eye. "He's too arrogant. Great Elder, are we going to let him go just like that? Where's the dignity of the frost dragons?" the second elder said to Douglas furiously. Douglas glanced at the second elder and calmly said, "If you're indignant, you can chase after him and fight him." "I." The second elder's face turned red, but he was suddenly at a loss for words. He didn't dare to agree. Since when did the dragon race have any dignity in front of Alex and Irina? Even if news of this spread, it would just be a show of appreciation, Douglas said with a complicated expression as he glanced at the black dot that had already disappeared into the sky. The other dragons were also furious when they heard that. Since when did a dragon have to be bullied by a human knight and an elf? This was really too bullying. Douglas retracted his gaze and looked at Fox, whose back was badly mutilated. He frowned and said, "Take Fox away to treat his injuries. The winner of this duel has not been decided yet. The position of the chief will continue to be vacant. Great Elder, if not for Alex's sudden interference, the winner of this duel would have been Fox. This was witnessed by all of us. Your way of handling it is not in accordance with the rules. Fox is already the new chief of the Frost Dragon race," the second elder said anxiously. "I agree with the second elder." "I agree too." Soon, another 4 to 5 elders came forward one after another and agreed. As the chief of the Frost Dragon race, apart from having outstanding abilities, one must also have the heart of the entire race, and not be someone who only cares about personal gains and losses. Back then, I had countless chances to kill Rankster, but I never really thought of killing him. That's why the Frost Dragon race became one of the top 10 dragon races again because of him. Douglas looked at the elders, and coldly said, "And today, he only wants to kill Elizabeth." Chapter 970. The purple-striped griffin flew at supersonic speed, and left the dragon island far behind in the blink of an eye. Meg carried Elizabeth in his arms, and felt the softness squeezing against his chest. While he was silently complaining about how perfect this ice beauty's development was, he was also silently restraining himself. It was not that he wanted to take advantage of her, but Elizabeth in his arms looked like she was going to let go at any time. Even if Meg wanted to put her down, he had to consider whether she would turn into a pile of flesh and blood like that fiery pig just now if she fell from a height of a few thousand meters. Elizabeth's mind was also blank at this moment. She, who had never been in contact with a man before, was actually in a man's arms now. Furthermore, this fellow was the enemy she had been trying to defeat for the past few years. However, the battle just now had depleted her energy, and the injuries she had sustained made her lose control of her body. Even moving a finger was an extravagant wish. She could feel the strength of the pair of arms hugging her, and the places that were touched felt as if they were burning. The sense of shame was simply too strong. She, who could not struggle, even wanted to just let herself pass out. "Wait a minute. Don't pass out first. Do you have a place you can go to? Or rather, where should I send you?" Meg asked Elizabeth, who was blushing and closing her eyes. Although he had saved Elizabeth, Meg could not bring her back to Amy's directly. That would be equivalent to announcing to the world that he was Alex, and that he owned Amy's in Chaos City. However, Elizabeth's injuries were too severe, and it was obviously not possible for her to recover by herself. Someone had to take care of her and give her timely treatment. Otherwise, even if she did not die, she would need a very long time to recover. Where should I go? Elizabeth opened her eyes again, and looked at the blue sky. She did not seem to have any friends since she was young. Apart from Frost Dragon Island, there was nowhere else she could go. The continent is so big, but there's no place I can go. A hint of self-mockery and loneliness flashed across Elizabeth's eyes. Suddenly, a figure squeezed into her mind. In Chaos City, there's an ice cream shop. After Elizabeth said this, her head tilted to the side and she completely fainted. There's an ice cream shop. Isn't this my ice cream shop? Meg stared at the unconscious Elizabeth with a melancholy expression. Hey, young lady, you can't be so irresponsible. How am I supposed to take the blame when you throw it to me? What's going on? Meg was completely dumbfounded. Originally, saving Elizabeth was just a matter of convenience. He did not expect that it would become a burden that he could not get rid of. Now that the dragon had been saved, how to deal with it had become the biggest problem. Sister Elizabeth, are you going to the ice cream shop? Will she get better after eating ice cream? Amy squirmed out from behind Meg's cloak, and looked at Elizabeth in Meg's arms curiously. If she didn't want to eat ice cream before she left, she might have thought so. Meg shrugged as he looked at Elizabeth in his arms, melancholy at how to deal with her. He naturally could not do something like throwing her down from the sky. After all, Amy was still watching from the side. However, it was not realistic to bring her home directly. There was no difference between bringing her to the ice cream shop and bringing her home. It was so frustrating. If father brings big sister Elizabeth home, then she can only sleep on the big bed with him. Big sister Irina should mind, right? Should I tell her? Amy mumbled at the side, a little distressed. However, Meg was quick-witted, and almost fell off the griffin's back. He turned to look at Amy. When did his adorable daughter become a little spy? Moreover, she could write her own script and add in the plot. No, no. Father will not bring any woman home for the night. Meg made his stance clear. Then does big sister Shirley not count? Amy blinked and asked. Meg, he won't bring anyone home for the night. Meg said helplessly. The little girl was becoming more and more difficult to deal with. Sometimes, she even made him feel like he was caught off guard. However, Amy's words gave Meg a new idea. It was obviously impossible to send Elizabeth to the ice cream shop directly. However, Mia and the others were currently living in the ice cream shop. If he left Elizabeth in the care of Yabamia, with her kind nature, she would definitely not stand by and do nothing. Meg had always been at ease with Mia doing things. System, I need some medical equipment to stop bleeding and suture wounds. The kind that is foolproof. Her injuries are too serious. If we don't stop the bleeding in time, I'm afraid she won't be able to make it to the city at night, Meg said in his mind. He looked around and then signaled for a Z to land on a rocky mountain. After laying Elizabeth flat on a flat rock, Meg took out the medical kit that the system had just received from behind the rock. He carefully read the manual that appeared in his mind, then took out a pair of scissors and prepared to cut Elizabeth's clothes open to treat her wounds. There were many wounds on her body. The most serious ones were the 2 wounds on her lower abdomen and back, and they were still bleeding. Meg was just about to do it when he saw Amy, who was standing at the side with a scrutinizing look. He hurriedly explained, Amy, Miss Elizabeth has suffered very serious injuries. If we don't treat her wounds now, she will die. So, I'm going to cut her clothes open to expose the wounds. After that, I'll treat and stop the bleeding. This is a pure process. Yes, yes, I believe in father. Amy nodded her little head. Okay, then I'll start. Meg breathed a sigh of relief and used the scissors to cut open Elizabeth's clothes at her lower abdomen. Father cut open big sister Elizabeth's skirt and pulled it hard, Amy muttered. Meg's hand trembled, and the scissors almost flew out. It seemed that he had to find some time to persuade this little comrade of his. He had to convince her to defect to his side. After calming down, Meg looked at the bloody wound on Elizabeth's lower abdomen. It was probably caused by an icicle. Even with the dragon's powerful self-healing ability, the wound still couldn't heal. According to the manual given by the system, after disinfecting the wound, he used a stapler-like sewing machine to stitch up the wound. After applying a layer of the system's secret ointment and wrapping it with gauze, the wound stopped bleeding. After treating the wound in a hurry, Meg followed suit and treated the wound on her back in the same way. There was still some time before the sun went down. Meg, who had nothing to do, treated all the wounds on Elizabeth's body except for the critical parts. Father cut off big sister Elizabeth's skirt. Amy whispered. Chapter 971. Night fell, and after a busy day, Yabamiya made sure that the ice cream shop had been completely cleaned, turned off the lights, and locked the door. She and Babla went to the back of the shop, and went up the stairs outside the wall. What's that? Barbara stopped in her tracks and grabbed onto Yabamiya. She looked at the black figure lying in front of the door with a wary expression. It looks like a person. Yabamiya was also slightly startled as he carefully examined the black figure. There's no movement. Seems like she's asleep. Or maybe she's unconscious. Barbara whispered after observing for a while. I'll go take a look. Yabamiya carefully walked over and turned on the light at the door. Yabamiya lowered his head to look at the figure lying in front of the door. After seeing the face, he immediately tensed up. Miss Elizabeth. The figure wrapped in a red cloak was none other than Elizabeth. Just like last time, her face was also very pale, and she seemed to have been severely injured. However, her entire body was wrapped in the red cloak, so it was impossible to see how serious her injuries were. Mia, is that the dragon from before? She seems to have been severely injured. Barbara looked at Elizabeth and whispered. Last time, Mia had brought a dragon back to the dormitory. Even though she didn't ask much about it, she still knew about it. Yes, Miss Elizabeth is my friend. Barbara, please open the door for me. I'm going to carry her in. Yabamiya nodded as he squatted down and gently picked up Elizabeth. Oh. Barbara turned around and took out the key to open the door. Thank you. Yabamiya carried Elizabeth into the room. It looks like she was sent here by someone. Why is it always here? Barbara stood at the door and looked around cautiously before closing the door with a puzzled expression. Father, Big Sister Mia and Big Sister Elizabeth are friends. In that case, we don't have to worry about her. Amy smiled as she stood on a tree not far away. Yeah, we don't have to worry anymore. Meg also smiled and nodded. Things went smoother than he had imagined. He had successfully thrown the blame on Elizabeth. But Father cut Big Sister Elizabeth's dress like that. Won't Big Sister Mia think he's a pervert? Amy muttered curiously. That's pure treatment, pure. Meg sighed in his heart. He looked at Amy and said with a smile, Amy, are you hungry? What do you want to eat tonight? I want to eat braised pork. Amy's eyes lit up, but she soon said dejectedly, but we lost Piggy. We won't be able to eat Piggy tonight. It's okay. Father will make it for Xiaomi tomorrow. Let's eat roast duck tonight. The two of us can eat a whole roast duck, Meg said with a smile. Okay, okay. Amy nodded her little head. The two of them jumped down from the tree and walked in the direction of Amy's. How did this happen? In the room, Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth, who had taken off her red cloak, and exclaimed in shock. Could it be that we met a pervert? the legendary sadist. Barbara was also shocked, and there was a hint of pity in her eyes. After taking off her red cloak, Elizabeth's blood-stained white dress was cut into pieces. There were countless cuts of various sizes, and her snow-white skin was exposed to the air. She looked extremely miserable, as if she had just been ravaged by a pervert. Yabamiya, who had a sad look on her face, suddenly noticed Elizabeth's wounds. Her eyes lit up, and she looked at Elizabeth again. She shook her head and said, "No, there are wounds where the cuts were made. Moreover, the wounds have been treated. Although I don't know what medicine was used, and although there are many cuts, there are no signs of being violated. Perhaps someone saved Miss Elizabeth." "That does seem to be the case." Barbara took a closer look and nodded in agreement. "However," she added, "but that person must be a pervert. How could a normal person cut dozens of holes in a girl's dress? I don't know what happened to Miss Elizabeth, but her injuries are too serious. We have to find someone to treat her as soon as possible." Yabamiya was a little anxious. "I don't know any healing magic." Barbara shrugged, indicating that there was nothing she could do. "Aisha is gone." Mia paced around the room anxiously. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. "Oh right, there's still Big Sister Cece. Barbara, help me look after Miss Elizabeth." "I'll be back soon," Yabamiya said, and quickly walked out the door. Barbara stood in the room and looked at Elizabeth, who was lying on the bed. She mumbled in confusion, "Why does a powerful frost dragon come to Mia time and time again after being severely injured? Big Sister Cece. Big Sister Cece." Yabamiya knocked on the door of the magic potion shop and called out. Soon, Cece opened the door of the magic potion shop. She looked at the anxious Mia and asked concernedly, "Mia, what's wrong?" Lulu appeared behind Cece, and silently put a thick coat on her. Yabamiya did not have time to care about the dog food that was forced on her. She said anxiously, "Big Sister Cece, can you please save a friend of mine? She's seriously injured." "Of course. Where is she now?" Cece nodded without hesitation. Yabamiya's face lit up. She quickly said, "She's in my dorm. I'll take you there." "Okay, let's go." Cece nodded. She walked out of the door and held Mia's cold hand. As they walked, she comforted her. "Don't worry. She'll be fine." Lulu followed them out silently. She closed the door gently and followed behind the two of them. "Just as I expected. Looks like I don't have to worry." Meg, who was standing at the door, turned around and walked into the restaurant. He was in a good mood. Amy sat on the high chair behind the counter. She looked at Ugly Duckling, who was sitting on the counter with an aggrieved expression, and consoled it. "Ugly Duckling, although we didn't bring you out this time, it's okay. Things like this will happen again in the future. You'll slowly get used to it." "Meow," Ugly Duckling meowed pitifully. "Don't meow like a cat." Amy warned it seriously. "Meow, meow," Ugly Duckling meowed even more pitifully. "You have to remember that you're a duck. No matter how ugly you are, you can't give up on yourself. You have to know that even I haven't given up on you." "What right do you have to give up on yourself?" Amy pinched Ugly Duckling's chubby cheeks. Then, she looked into its eyes with a serious expression, and said, "Now, learn to meow like a duck. Quack, quack, quack. Meow, meow, meow. Yes, quack, quack. Meow, meow, meow." Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, the mobile version of this book, .com. Chapter 972. Thank you, Sister Cece, for making you come in such cold weather. Yabamiya walked Cece to the door and said with gratitude and guilt, It's a good thing to save someone's life. Also, Cece put her hand in Lulu's big hand and said with a smile, with Lulu here, it's not cold at all. Hee hee. Lulu smiled honestly and put the coat on Cece again. Yabamiya, who had a lot of words of gratitude to say, suddenly choked. There was only one word in her mind, goodbye. All right, Mia, go back and take care of that lady. She's exhausted a lot of her physical and mental strength. Luckily, her wounds were treated in time, so her condition is not too bad. She should be able to move freely tomorrow after a good night's sleep. However, she needs to rest for at least a month if she wants to fully recover, Cece said with a smile. Okay. Mia watched as Lulu and Cece walked away hand in hand, and then turned to enter the room. Elizabeth, who was lying on the bed, was still wearing the dress that had been cut into pieces. However, the horrible wounds on her body had all healed and turned into light red scars. Her pale face had regained its color. Cece's life magic had shown a miraculous healing effect. What happened after Miss Elizabeth left? How did she get so badly injured? Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth with a pained expression. I have to help her change into a new set of clothes. If she wakes up and sees her clothes like this, she'll definitely be sad. Although I don't know who treated her wounds, just like Barbara said, the way they treated her was so perverted. Yabamiya thought to herself. She went to get a basin of water and wiped Elizabeth's body clean. Then, she found the pajamas that she had worn last time from the wardrobe and helped her change into them. Yabamiya, who had packed everything and changed into pajamas, stood by the bed. She looked at Elizabeth, who was sound asleep, and mumbled, "It should be fine if I sleep next to her, right?" At the same time, Meg, who had just coaxed Amy to sleep, was lying in bed and counting the day's gains. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission and successfully capturing a fiery pig. The reward is a red braised meat recipe. It's already in your account. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind, and a golden bag of experience appeared in Meg's mind. Meg was not in a hurry to open it. Instead, he asked with a smile, "System, how much are the treasures we've seized today worth?" The treasures seized by the host today, according to the recent market value, are approximately 1.53 billion copper coins, the system quickly replied. Interesting. The smile on Meg's face grew wider. Today's trip was not in vain. Not only did he get the red braised meat recipe, but he also got 1.5 billion for free. System, 1.5 billion here, plus the 300 million downstairs, makes a total of 1.845 billion copper coins. I'll buy 2 strength points from you to restore me to my peak condition. Is that okay? Meg asked in his mind, full of anticipation. Although 1.8 billion was not a small amount, if it could restore him to his peak condition, he would give it to the system without batting an eye. No. The system's answer was quick and decisive. Even 1.8 billion is not okay. System, aren't you a little too greedy? Meg frowned. Host, please take this system seriously. This system is a god of cookery cultivation system, not a pay-to-win system. Although it is an unchanging truth that pay-to-win can make one stronger, this system is also a system with moral integrity and a bottom line. Increasing the host's strength is to improve the host's culinary skills, and at the same time, to have the ability to protect himself in this alternate world. However, please understand your priorities. You came to this world to receive punishment and become the god of cookery under the supervision of this system. At the same time, you shoulder the great mission of using Earth's delicacies to conquer this world, not using force to conquer the world. The system's righteous voice sounded. So, you don't intend to sell it? Meg frowned. Sell? Of course, I'll sell it. The system quickly answered. It's just that the host's strength has exceeded the scope set by this system. In order to avoid being noticed by the heavenly axiom and being struck by lightning, this system must impose a necessary restriction on your strength increase. What do you mean? Meg's frown deepened. Within a month, the host can only purchase 0.5 strength points from this system. After a month, this system will evaluate and decide whether the host has the right to purchase any new strength points. At the same time, the system will no longer grant the right to purchase any strength points above level 8. The host must complete the designated mission to obtain them, the system answered. No room for discussion. No room for discussion. Meg sighed. The feeling of having money but not being able to spend it was indeed melancholic. What gave Meg a bigger headache was that the last 2 strength points couldn't be obtained in the form of purchase. Judging from the system's decisive tone, it should be non-negotiable. It was most likely a setting set by the heavenly axiom. This also cut off Meg's plan to purchase all the strength points at once after he sold the shares of the steam locomotive and obtained a huge amount of wealth. The most urgent thing to improve his strength was to return to the peak and go to the wind forest to rescue Irina. After that, he would kill all his enemies from the past. At the signing of the peace treaty in 3 months' time, if all the races couldn't reach an agreement, the Norland continent would very likely descend into chaos. Before that, he had to make himself strong enough to protect himself as soon as possible. He might not be able to save the world, but he would definitely protect Amy well. In this case, I'll use 300 million to buy a strength point. Meg thought to himself. The sooner he bought it, the sooner the 1-month waiting period would pass. He still understood this simple logic. Ding! 300 million worth of gems has been deducted. 0.5 strength point has been credited. Would the host like to undergo the 7 lightning strikes now? Wait! Meg jumped up from the bed immediately. As he walked to the balcony, he said, "System, try to keep a low profile. Don't let anyone notice you. Don't worry, the system will strike lightning. There's no need to worry about safety." The system consoled. Crack! Boom! 7 bolts of lightning lit up the sky, waking many people up from their sweet dreams. System, what happened to the safety you said? Meg reached out to cover his private parts. He puffed out a puff of white smoke and rolled his eyes. His hair stood on end, emitting smoke. In terms of safety, the system has already perfectly protected the host, the system said with satisfaction. Hee, system, fuck your grandpa. Meg turned and ran downstairs. It was a disgrace to be naked. This is Mamie's. I wonder if the person young Master Timothy wants to kill is here. At this moment, a man in black appeared below Mamie's and whispered to himself. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 973. After going downstairs to take a shower, Meg, who had changed into a new set of clothes, walked to the window, and lifted a corner of the curtain to look at the man in black outside the restaurant. He had already noticed this man's presence, but he didn't expect him to stay after taking a shower. Judging from his attire, he was obviously trying to tell others that he had ill intentions. He had replaced the word "bad guy" with a piece of black cloth, and hung it on his face. 7th tier human. Is the man from Rodu finally here? Mag pursed his lips upon hearing this. This was a little later than he had anticipated. However, this also confirmed one thing: news of his identity as Noah Gould had most likely already spread, and he had gained the trust of the Northern Empire. That was why a 7th tier knight had come to him. Mag had done some research on the feud between Noah Gould and Timothy back in Rodu. The fact that a 7th-tier knight was sent to kill him was a clear indication of just how deep the feud was between the two of them. The fact that Noah Gould had stolen Timothy's wife was a testament to the deep hatred between the two of them. A contemplative look appeared on Mag's face. I can't do it here. Urian's powerful spiritual power will definitely be able to sense everything that's happening here. There won't be any rain to muffle the sound, so I have to find a suitable place to kill him. I heard that the rules of Chaos City are very strict. Before I kill him, I have to confirm that the person I'm killing is Noah, and I can't leave any traces behind. Otherwise, I'll lose more than I gain if those fellows from the Grey Temple catch me. Downstairs, the man in black, Cassidon, was also hesitant and cautious. He slowly approached the restaurant's door, and a cold glint appeared from his sleeve. Right at this moment, a calm voice came from the window on the 2nd floor. Did Timothy send you to find me? Cassidon, who had just grabbed the door handle, froze. Then, he looked up at Meg, who was standing by the window. That fellow under the moonlight looked exactly the same as the portrait in his arms. That was his target. Seems like you know what I'm here for, Noah Gould. Cassidon let go of the door handle, and took 2 steps back. He looked at Meg with a scornful smile, and said, in that case, come down and let me kill you. You'll suffer less, and I'll have less trouble. Why not? You think too little of the mission. You're not a competent assassin. Meg placed his hand on the window and jumped down. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile as he said, come and chase me. If you catch me, I'll let you kill me. As soon as he finished speaking, he broke into a run. Swish! Swish! Poisoned arrows and darts flew at Meg from behind, but all of them narrowly missed him and nailed into tree trunks and rocks. This kid's luck is pretty good. He actually dodged all of them. Cassidon frowned. He glanced at the window on the 2nd floor, and a sinister smile appeared on his lips. He seems to have a half-elf daughter. Young Master Timothy wants me to bring her back alive. But now, let's go and kill that guy first. Running to a place where there's no one is around is just what I want. The black figure disappeared into the darkness, and followed Meg from a distance. The Aiden Square was huge. Meg led the guy behind him around the square in a circle, and finally stopped in the most remote stone forest. This place was on the opposite side of Mamis. Even if something happened, no one would suspect Mamis. Under the cold moonlight, the landscape here was a miniature version of the Vic Mountain stone forest of the goblins. The 4 to 5 meter tall boulders looked rather spectacular, but in this cold winter night, it seemed a little eerie. Kid, why aren't you running anymore? Cassidon stopped 5 to 6 meters away, and sneered at Meg. This guy's speed was a little beyond his expectations. Even he, who was best at speed, almost lost him a few times. Luckily, he was extremely talented in tracking, and he didn't let him run away in the end. In order to not lose you, I have waited for a long time. Meg smiled as he looked at Cassidon. He had just advanced to the 7th tier, and the sense of power coming from his body made him eager to try. An opponent who was also at the 7th tier was a good practice partner. Humph, kid, don't talk nonsense. Cassidon's face darkened, and he shouted coldly as he pulled out the short sword at his waist. I am here on young Master Timothy's orders to take your lowly life. In that case, a duel is inevitable, Meg said solemnly as he pulled out his long sword. Duel? Ha, you are only at level 4. What right do you have to duel with me? This is just a massacre, Cassidon said with disdain. Cassidon said with disdain. He took a step forward and stepped into the void. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Mag. However, all his movements suddenly stopped at this moment. His widened eyes slowly moved down, and he looked at the long sword that had pierced his heart in disbelief. You. How could you be so fast? Don't talk nonsense. I can last very long. Meg took a step back with a serious expression and pulled out his long sword. He looked at the unwilling Cassidy and said helplessly, "You are too slow. So slow that I am a little disappointed. We are both at level 7, but why are you so lousy? Boring." Cassidy's eyes widened, and he said with difficulty, You are not. No, congratulations, you got it right. I will reward you with a sword. Meg stabbed the long sword in his hand again, and the sword went straight for Cassidy's throat. After wiping the blood off the long sword on Cassidy's clothes, Meg carefully cleaned up the scene. He went back the way he came, cleaned up all the traces, and collected all the hidden weapons that Cassidy had thrown out. After making sure that there were no traces left, he went back into the room through the window. He took a shower again, changed into his pajamas, and lay on the bed. He opened the red braised pork experience bag. It was fat but not greasy. The sweet and soft red braised pork was a home-cooked dish that most people in China loved to eat. It had a place in the traditional dishes. Meg was a loyal fan of red braised pork. There were some differences in the way this dish was cooked. For example, there were obvious regional characteristics in the choice of spices. The red braised pork that the system gave him should be a combination of the methods of red braised pork from the north and the south. However, Meg had never tried to make red braised pork before, so he was not sure what kind of flavor it would taste like. However, red braised pork was a dish that he often ate. Back then, he should have made a lot of comments on Weibo. Now that he thought about it, he was really young. He talked so much, but in the end, he was the one who suffered. Come on, red braised pork. I want to see how difficult this dish is. Meg looked back at Amy, who was already asleep. He closed his eyes and pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 974. Red braised pork was not a complicated dish. It was a homely version, and most people could make it just by looking at the tutorial. However, the bad thing was that Mag had indeed made too many unreasonable requests back then. Now, he was the one who had to bear all the consequences. Failure. It's still a failure. System, your request is a little too much. My coloring is already uniform enough, right? Even a brush might not be as standard as mine, and you still say it's a failure. Meg said indignantly as he looked at the bright red braised pork on the plate. Let me correct you. This is not the system's request. You can see the first request. Every piece of red braised pork should be bright red as if it was painted with the most delicate brush. There should be no flaws at all. Fuck, which idiot made this request? Meg rolled his eyes. Weibo user, Meg Shin. Published on May 20, 2017. Meg, very good. Only with such a ruthless attitude can you make delicious red braised pork. Meg forced a smile. He dumped the bowl of red braised pork in front of him into the kitchen waste bin, and began to make a new bowl of red braised pork. It was a difficult night. Meg wanted to transmigrate back countless times and beat himself to death for bringing the internet celebrity he had just wooed to dinner. Who asked you to talk so much nonsense? Rodu, the second prince's manor. Your Highness, Alex appeared on Dragon Island today. After saving Rankster's daughter, he disappeared again, a man in black reported to Josh respectfully. He has been appearing around Chaos City frequently recently. Continue to look for him in Chaos City and its vicinity, Josh said in a low voice. That man in black hesitated for a while, but still gritted his teeth, and said, "But, Your Highness, even if we find Alex, with his ability, no one can pose a threat to him. Instead, we might provoke him to take revenge." Josh's gaze turned cold. He looked at the man in black and coldly said, "Even if you are going to take revenge, you must find him for me. I want to know his whereabouts and where he hid his daughter. Only when I find his daughter can I control him and make him know fear." But the man in black still wanted to say something. "You only have 3 months. Before the peace agreement is signed, you must find him. Otherwise, all of you will commit suicide," Joshua coldly interrupted the black-clothed man. "Yes." The black-robed man's face turned pale in an instant. He quickly responded and left. Joshua looked at the butler and asked, "How's the situation in the Wind Forest?" "Reporting to Your Highness, the spies have reported that after Princess Irina was deposed, she has been in seclusion with the Tree of Life. The Spring of Life was cut off for a period of time, but a few days ago, spring water began to gush out again. However, Princess Irina still hasn't appeared. The Elven Queen was still in seclusion, and no one knew when she would come out. According to the think tank, there was a 50% chance that she was already dead." Helena didn't explain why she had joined forces with the First Highness, and even stopped communicating with him for the past month. "Borg, on the other hand, has tried to contact us," the butler explained clearly. "Borg is making such a big fuss because he wants to become the first Elven king in the history of the elves, right?" Josh pursed his lips in a mocking manner, and said, "Heh, what a bold idea. Only Irina can take that position and then marry me. Only then will she be able to unleash her greatest potential. Your Highness, are we going to reject Borg's contact?" the butler asked. "No, let's contact them and see what Borg wants." Joshua shook his head. "Helena's situation is unclear. If she really intends to give up on cooperating with us and work with Sean, then we have to make preparations as soon as possible. Borg's status and power in the Elven race are now no less than Helena's. Furthermore, he's even more stupid." "All right, I'll make the arrangements now." The butler nodded and quickly left. "Alex, although you're back again, I'll make sure you die completely next time." A cold voice echoed in the room. The Wind Forest. Under the Tree of Life, Irina, whose aura had completely recovered to its peak, walked around the Tree of Life in confusion. She muttered, "That's strange. Why did all the undead aura suddenly disappear?" The branches of the Tree of Life had all recovered their tender green color, and the countless hanging branches were exuding a rich aura of life. It was like the spring day, and the branches swayed cheerfully. It seemed to be in a very good mood. Could it be the god of life? But it doesn't seem like it. I didn't feel the arrival of life magic. It seems to be because of the heavy rain that night. Irina shook her head, still puzzled. "Forget it. What's certain is that my old friend and I have completely recovered. So, it's time to do something now." A smile appeared on Irina's face. She tapped her feet lightly, and jumped out of the opening at the top of the cave. Standing on top of the cave, she cleared her throat, and loudly said, Irina, am back again." A crisp and pleasant voice reverberated throughout the entire Wind Forest and into the ears of all of the elves. "Princess Irina." Some elves were shocked, some elves exclaimed, some elves were sad, and some elves were elated. "It's the princess." Sally, who was about to follow Elliot to Mistress Helena's cave abode, stopped in her tracks, and looked in the direction of the Tree of Life's cave with surprise and joy. "Has she completely recovered?" Elliot's expression was a little complicated. He looked at the elated Sally, and continued to walk forward. Sally withdrew her gaze, and quickly followed Elliot. She was going to accept the final vote from the elders today, and that would determine whether she could become the new elven princess. Of course, she knew that as long as Irina was around, no one in this world could replace her position in the hearts of the ordinary elves. She didn't want to replace her either. She just wanted to protect Irina's position before she officially returned, and not let the elven race fall into the abyss of darkness. In a dark secret room in Borg's mansion, Borg, who was holding an elven skin in his hand, was shocked. He turned around, and revealed a hideous face. There were black traces of corrosion on his face, and in some places, even his bones could be seen. It was a ghastly sight. Irina! How could she have recovered? Borg roared in a hoarse voice. Princess Irina is back. The elven slaves restrained themselves and cheered. The joy in their hearts was indescribable. In this forest, the only hope they could feel was Princess Irina. Since freedom has been shackled and abandoned, then tear these shackles apart and return to the souls of the elves. Resist, my people. This time, I will fight by your side. Irina's voice sounded again, and she also left the top of the Tree of Life's cave. Chapter 975. The next morning, Meg woke up with a start. Looking at the alarm clock at 5:00 on the bedside, he felt like he was in a dream. It took him more than 50 days and nights to reach the standard he set for himself in the past for a serving of red braised pork. He was standing on the shoulders of countless top chefs, and he practiced without caring about the consumption of ingredients. Even a chef like Meg, who had been in the test field for the god of cookery for a long time, could not bear it. It seems that I can't speak carelessly, or I'll be punished. Meg muttered with mixed feelings. His body had rested well, but he was a little tired after being tortured by himself. He lay down again and slept for another hour before getting up energetically. The first thing he did after getting out of bed was a set of military boxing exercises. His 7th-tier body really was different. Powerful strength filled every muscle in his body, and Mag felt like he could even take down a dinosaur with a single punch, let alone a cow. Last night, in addition to making red braised pork, Meg also did adaptive training for his body in the test field for the god of cookery. After all, the opponent yesterday was too weak to be of any use. He had to rely on himself for this kind of thing. A level 7 mage would be called a senior mage among mages, and he had entered another level among knights. The strength of a LV7 knight was no longer just a reflection of strength and speed. When combined with the corresponding battle skills, they would be able to erupt with great power. In Alex's memory, there was a combat skill called Thunder Flash, which could be used after level 7. The most important thing that Meg did last night was to practice Thunder Flash. This combat skill could give Meg super speed and explosive power in an instant, and it had a strong growth potential. As his strength increased, the power would continue to increase. It was one of Alex's famous combat skills. If I used Thunder Flash yesterday, that guy might not even have the time to talk. Meg shrugged as he sighed internally. He had been paralyzed when he first came to this world, but now, he had become a high-tier knight, and he was starting to develop his own ideas about being a stay-at-home dad. He was very satisfied with this sense of accomplishment. Since I can't restore my strength to level 10 in a short period of time, it's time to activate Mamie's gold membership system. Meg washed his face and walked towards the study. Elizabeth let out a soft moan of comfort. She felt as if she was lying on a soft and comfortable bed, wrapped in a quilt that smelled faintly of sunshine. However, her arms seemed to be pressed down by something soft and round. Although it was a little heavy, it was soft, warm, and quite comfortable. Where am I now? Wasn't I taken away by Alex? Elizabeth opened her eyes and saw the face that was almost in front of her. Elizabeth did not jump away immediately because she was very familiar with this beautiful and delicate face, and she had slept with it before. Mia. It seems that she understood what I said at the end. Elizabeth heaved a sigh of relief. At least this situation was better than waking up next to Alex. If it was the latter, she would definitely stab her sword into his heart. After carefully feeling her body, Elizabeth was surprised to find that her injuries had recovered by 50 to 60%. Although some internal injuries were not so easy to heal, at least simple movements and walking would not be a problem. Is she the one who saved me again? And that elf? Elizabeth's gaze softened as she looked at Yabamiya, who was nestled in her arms. It was a very special feeling to be able to see her the moment she opened her eyes. It was as if there was another figure in her heart that she cared about. It was warm. Then, Elizabeth quickly discovered what was pressing down on her hand. After looking at it for a while, she thought to herself, although she is quite thin, she seems to have developed quite well. She is about my age. Yabamiya subconsciously shrank into Elizabeth's arms. She found a comfortable place to rest her head and went back to sleep. She must have had a hard time all these years, Elizabeth thought to herself as she looked at Mia in her arms. Her heart ached as she hugged her gently. Yabamiya woke up in a warm embrace in a daze. She opened her eyes and froze for a few seconds. She looked at Elizabeth, who seemed to still be sleeping soundly. She was almost completely in Elizabeth's arms, and her head was pillowed on Elizabeth's soft breasts. She blushed, and slowly withdrew from Elizabeth's embrace. Only when she had completely gotten rid of Elizabeth did she secretly heave a sigh of relief. Why is my sleeping posture so bad? Miss Elizabeth is already injured, and I am still lying on top of her. Yabamiya muttered in annoyance. She looked at Elizabeth, who still had her eyes closed, and felt sorry for her. It seems that Miss Elizabeth's injuries are quite serious. She is still sleeping soundly. But I have to go to work now. I will bring her breakfast later. Mia wrote a note and placed it beside the bed. Then, she gently closed the door and went out. Elizabeth opened her eyes and looked at the note beside the bed. A smile appeared on her face. It said, "Miss Elizabeth, I am Mia. Please rest well in the room. I will bring you breakfast later. Please do not wander around." The door was pushed open again. Elizabeth hurriedly closed her eyes. Yabamiya walked in with a glass of water. She gently placed it on the bedside table. She glanced at Elizabeth before turning to leave. Elizabeth slowly sat up and took a sip of the warm water. It seemed to be very light honey water. It was slightly sweet and warm. It was very considerate. If I stay here, I will bring her a lot of trouble, won't I? If Fox finds out that I am here, he will definitely send people to deal with me. Elizabeth thought to herself. She looked at the pink room with a heavy expression. I will leave immediately after I recover, Elizabeth whispered to herself after a while. Until then, I will just stay here quietly. Announcement: in order to maintain order and peace in the restaurant, Mamie Restaurant was going to introduce a gold member system. All customers above the 7th tier would become a gold member of Mamie Restaurant as long as they were willing to help Mamie Restaurant once when Boss Mag needed them and sign the letter of commitment. Exclusive benefits for gold members: 1. You can order one more serving of tofu pudding every week. Non-complimentary. You have to pay the bill. 2. You will have a chance to be selected as a taster for a new dish. Eat the delicious food first. 3. To be continued. If you are interested in becoming a gold member, please ask the waiter after paying the bill to obtain the letter of commitment and a gold member card. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.